All right, welcome back to another episode of the Game Theory Podcast. This is episode 40, and we're talking about narrative RPGs and ideologies. I like how that rhymes, David. I don't even think you meant to.
I didn't mean to, but maybe my subconscious did, neurologically.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Can we just get into that right now?
Yeah, let's just get it off your chest.
Everybody, I just...
let's have a neuro discussion.
Shut your face! I hate the... Oh man, okay. And okay, my field is bad about this too. And what is this? Well, you're about to find out. I'm going to give you an example. Psychotherapy. What other kind of therapy would there be? It all involves psychology, of course. Why did you put psycho in front of it? Except to make it
therapy.
Yeah, it's almost like, well, okay, yeah, but that's true. Psychotherapy, okay, maybe not as much, but psycho-assessment is one. Psycho-education is another one.
Right. What do you do with your client today?
Psycho-assessment, a little psycho talk, and a little, psycho-challenging of psycho values. Like, it's just, and that so my field does it too. But there's one that's really bad in public, like this, I love the fact that we're interested in psychology, we're interested in neurology, we're interested in neuroscience rather. We're interested in a lot of those topics. It's really cool. The public's getting really hungry for this information. I like that. But what I don't like is everybody putting neuro on things. I just had someone tell me I'm not neurotypical. I was like, what? She goes, or I'm not a neurotypical. I said, what is a neurotypical? And of course I was nice about it. I was like, well, I'm actually in academia at the moment. And my lab, while it's not my research focus exactly, but my lab is explicitly about getting good science out to people so they understand. So help me understand what this neurotypical is. Maybe I can help. She said, well, I don't have a standard issue brain.
Here you go, Private. That's your standard issue brain. Your standard.
Yeah, get going. I was like, you know that your brain is literally just an organ that is both melded by your environment and helps you move about your environment. There's no two brains alike. Your brain changes every single second. What are you talking about? Anyway, I was like, there's no such thing as a standard issue brain. And more importantly, like the whole neuro thing in general. Jesus, people. Okay, so why do I care?
Yes.
Why do I care? Because this is the new wave thing of what personality was in the yesteryear. And I mean that with regard to therapy. Whenever I'm trying to help someone, and I'm like, hey, look, I mean, your anxiety's tearing your life apart. You're having panic attacks. You've now withdrawn now where you can't work as a blank anymore. I'm thinking of a specific example, so I'm censoring out. And so now you're working at this a corner shop, basically, like a gas station type thing, and you've got an advanced degree. So your anxiety's really, inhibited you. What are your thoughts on how to get out? And she was like, well, I can't. What's that?
It's impossible. My brain's too anxious. It's a neuro brain.
That's the crap. Before yesteryear, it was, and I've encountered this too. I do a lot. Is they say that's just my personality. I can't change it. And I say, well, okay. So I hear that you could never change it, but do you think that there's anything that could ever change it? No. I mean, it's my personality. I don't want to change who I am. And I'm like, who I am? I don't know how to define who I am. I know that there are certain things you do, and that is how people define you. But this is one we want to get rid of, right? You're not giving me any wiggle room.
It defines you.
Yeah. So same thing with the neuro thing. Now they're just like, that's how my brain is, man. That's how my brain was made. And I'm like, what? No one made your brain, first of all. Second of all,
it's just wired that way, man. It's just my brain.
Yeah, it's like getting a sunburn and then being like, oh, it's just red, man. That's what it does. That's how my skin is. That's how it was made. I'm like, no, it was reacting to its environment. What are you talking about? You don't understand organs, do you? It's just weird, man. But anyway, so to anyone who's listening, just please give us some wiggle room if you're going for some professional help. Don't say fix me, but you can't fix me because it's who I am. So anyway, it's always a fun thing. But anyway, so how was your week?
My week was excellent. I am on summer vacation, so my life is beautiful. I have set aside an hour every day to learn Japanese because my sister is in Japan currently, and I want to be able to converse with her in Japanese when she gets home.
So, you're a weird dude.
Yeah, you just got a lot of free time. You just end up improving yourself when you have no other obligations. It's weird.
No, you end up improving yourself. Most people sit around in their boxers and scratch themselves.
Oh, there's been a lot of that too. I said 1 hour a day. There's still 23 on account.
Yeah, fair enough. But no, I think that's awesome. Good for you.
I learned one thing is that it's really hard to learn Japanese. It's not like a Latin-based language because the first thing you have to do is learn the 3 alphabets before you can actually learn anything else.
Wait, hold the phone. 3 alphabets?
Yeah, you've got your katakana, your hiragana, And well, the third one you don't really need to. Well, then there's kanji, which is just you don't get to learn it. You just have to memorize each one individually. It's like the Chinese characters.
Oh, right.
And then there's a fourth alphabet that, yeah, don't worry about it. Basically, there's two that you need to know, and then a third one that I say need to know. You need to know to learn Japanese. The kanji one, that's the shitty one because when you
Yeah.
go to Japan, that's what everything's written in. So you spend all this time learning like the phonetic one, the one that's actually sounds, and then you get there and it's all character based. And you're like, what? Why? Everything's kanji. So yeah, that'll be later. Right now, I just want to learn how to speak it. And to start off with that, I'd learn. And this is just kind of boring for people who aren't interested in languages, but I think it's interesting because just the way their alphabet's set up. Each letter, instead of a sound like a k or a l, like each one is a ka or a la or a ma, right? So it's like a vowel sound and a consonant. And so you end up with a lot of different letters that way. Like I spent an hour learning the first 4 sets, which is about 20 letters, and I'm about a third of the way through the first alphabet. So
Wow.
I don't know, and then and then there's more. So someone's gonna correct me on this, but just guesstimating, like the hiragana alphabet has 80 to 90 characters.
Wow.
So anyway, it's fun. I've got this little flashcard system on my computer where it like flashes the thing, and I'm supposed to like type in the sound it makes. And so I've just been doing it that way because it's just brute force memorization. You just have to start associating weird squiggles with sounds.
Man,
but if you don't do it, you feel like you're illiterate, which is how I felt in Korea most of the time.
Oh, must have been horrible while you were over there living it up.
It gave me some empathy for people who never learn how to read. Because
Well,
you're just walking around, you're like, these are just symbols, and I don't know what they mean.
Yeah. Well, that's fun. I don't have anything else really interesting to say except that, except the game-related stuff. And also, it's possible I might have gotten MRSA. We don't know. Which is like, I guess that's not the right way to say it, but it's like resistant. I don't know what it stands for actually. A staph something. It's like a staph infection type thing.
Oh.
Yeah, because I got cut on my leg, and I work in college, so that's I work in a few different offices in the college right now, and so it's just a bunch of nasty people coming through. It's like, you work in a school, the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, just disease everywhere. So we're constantly getting these updates where it's like, oh, hey, this guy just got flesh-eating bacteria. Careful. That didn't happen actually. That was in the army, but it's stuff like that. Like, oh, hey, there's a bunch of poop in the water now, so careful for that.
Don't drink water for a while.
Yeah. So that's fun. So during orientation, you get a bunch of people from all over the United States, and they bring in all this filth, and everyone gets sick in the offices, and it's horrible.
Would you say it's a wretched hive of scum and villainy?
I might say that. Yes, indeed. But they're all well-meaning, and I like meeting the new people. But anyway, so yeah, that was interesting. We don't know if it could have just been an infected cut, but whatever it was, they were like, that looks pretty nasty, man. We're gonna have to amputate your leg. I'm just kidding. Just rub this cream on it.
Rub some dirt in it.
Yeah, and then they tried to give me this like oral drug. So like they tried to kind of hit it twice over. Once was like a topical cream, and once was taking in it systemically, where that means it gets in your system and fights it from internally.
Mm-hmm.
But I was looking at the side effects, and I was like, okay, let's just let's see. Can I be in the sun? Do I need to eat certain things? Do I need to drink it with a full glass of milk? What's going on here? And I started reading it, and before it even gets to the rare ones, it's like this has killed. Or this kills some people because of the severe liver reaction. And then I was like, what? And it's not even in the rare ones. Like below it said, rare effects that if you see these, go straight to the hospital. It's just
There's
in
like
there.
a 50-50 chance your liver will shut down.
Yeah. So then I was like, well, that's probably pretty small percentage because FDA wouldn't have passed it. So I look at the next one, and it says often causes people to stop breathing while they're sleeping. And I was like, or not often, sorry, has caused people to stop breathing while they're sleeping. And I was like, what? And it's like, yeah, it'll kill you. And I was like, oh, well, surely that's a small percentage. And I keep going down the list, and there's like 4 more. And I was like, let me just see what kind of research there is, if this is really important to do this twice over. Because I know that my particular doctor is very prescription happy. She gave me a steroid shot and like 3 drugs, like Flexeril. What's the one? Flexeril's like a muscle relaxer. Because I have this muscle twitches from like my veteran injuries, and so she gave me that. She gave me Vicodin? No, not Vicodin. Sorry. What is the one where for sleeping?
Ambien?
No, no.
Ambien's a hell of a drug, man.
It is. I keep wanting to say Vistaril, but it's not Vistaril. Okay, anyway, whatever it is. It's a huge like narcoleptic basically. It makes you just fall just straight to sleep. And it's also a lot of people use it like kind of recreationally and stuff. She gave me that, and she gave me like two other drugs, like and then naproxen sodium, which is kind of like it's kind of like ibuprofen, specifically for the back, areas. Anyway, she gave me like 6 prescriptions and a shot in my butt. Cortisone. I was like, for inflammatory? She's like, yeah. I was like, oh, I guess that makes sense. She gave it to me, and then I went and looked it up and asked another friend of mine who's in the medical profession, and she was like, that's crazy. That's a lot of stuff. Anyway, so the point is, I'm not taking that drug. So now I'm just doing it topically because the research shows that it is equally as effective for just the topical agent, unless it's something that's spread to another site. So I don't know why I brought that up.
Yeah. All right.
No. Oh, I remember why. Because I was thinking to myself, like, if your doctor gives you something, I'm not saying we should challenge our doctors ever. Please don't take that advice. I'm saying that let's make sure that we ask the doctor, like I should have done, in there and said, like, hey, what's the side effects of this, and should I just take this and this, or like, is there any chance I can do this? I typically don't like systemic drugs, that kind of thing. Anyway, but just have a conversation with your doctor. But obviously your doctor knows best.
Talk to your doctor before ordering Temacil.
Temacil, yes.
Find out if Temacil is right for you.
Yeah, it's amazing. So anyway, well, cool. That's anything else in the intro section?
Well, let me tell you about all my bodily functions that are happening.
Yeah.
This mold is looking kind of weird. So.
Oh man, I don't know. People, I don't know. This is just my neuro talk. It's how my brain works. Just who I am. Sorry. I'll never change, even if I get negative feedback.
Impossible to change. It's not how it works.
Instead, I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna bring that stuff up next time. That's what I'm immediately thinking right now. So, anyway.
Cool. Okay, so let's go into recent news.
Let's do it. So, recent news. Let's talk about staph infection. No, I'm just kidding.
What's the grossest infection you've ever had?
It's just a little cut on my leg. It doesn't look that bad until the scab came off. Okay, I'm done. Anyway. Oh, my God. I should just edit out this whole thing. Recent news. So, what's been going on in the news? I have been woefully under-newsed this week.
Not enthused about the news?
Oh.
Well, I got some news that'll get you enthused. Listen to this.
Right.
Butterfly in the sky. I can fly twice as high.
Is that Star Wars?
What? No. Take a look. It's in a book.
Yeah, Star Wars Rainbow.
I can Star Wars everything. No, it's not Star Wars. It's fucking Reading Rainbow, man. And it's coming to an everything near you.
Really? What do you mean?
So
I heard about this.
Yeah. It's actually really cool. There's a Kickstarter LeVar Burton puts up, and he's like, all right, so here's the problem. He literally says, here's the problem. 1 in 4 kids in the U.S. right now will grow up illiterate. They cannot read at grade level by 4th grade and are 400% more likely to drop out of high school if that's the case.
Wow. That's a huge statistic.
That's a lot of illiterate. That is me in Korea levels of illiterate. It's not okay. Yeah. So his solution is to bring back Reading Rainbow, which you're like, oh, Reading Rainbow, I have fond memories of that. You should, because it won over 200 broadcast awards between 1983 and 2006, including a Peabody and 26 Emmy Awards. 26 of them.
Wow.
So, it's been on about 26 years, actually, of 83 to 2006. So almost every year it got an Emmy, and it's pretty much amazing. Anyone that's from a younger generation of ours that didn't grow up with Reading Rainbow, I pity the fool. I pity your illiterate face.
Your stupid face. You're probably illiterate.
It's a good thing you're not reading this right now, because you would understand what I was saying.
Yeah, I'll read the news for you.
So his idea is to get it into the, first of all, they asked for $1 million to get it back online, put it on the web, and get free access for schools, so classrooms can have it. Every child, every school watching Reading Rainbow, they got it going on. But they've reached that goal in like 20 seconds. Like everybody was like, pledge. So they're up to 3 million something. It's 3 million some change now, 71,000 backers. So their new goal, 5 million, And when they get 5 million, they're going to put Reading Rainbow, and this is why this is game related, on your mobile phone, your Android, your Wii U, your PlayStation 4, your Xbox One, your everything. All the consoles get Reading
Wow.
Rainbow.
Wow. That's awesome. What?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you feel about that? Do you think the people are going to use it on there or what?
Yeah, most definitely. First of all, a lot of dads buying consoles. A lot of dads have kids. A lot of dads feel guilty letting their kids just play, Spider-Man all day.
Not this
Oh,
guy.
what's this? We've got Reading Rainbow. Now, when mom comes in, are you playing video games? Nope. Your son's learning how to read, madam. Your son is learning how to read.
Oh wow, yeah, dude. Actually, there's a recent study done where it's just within the past 5 years, kids' screen time, like including iPads, ever since the iPad movement really is, where the data point started. Since the mass popularization, I should say, and smartphone games for kids, their screen time is up 20%, and it was already horrifyingly high. Like for the average child, they spend a lot of time like engaging
In front
in
of
screen
screens.
time. Yeah, which is fun. I'm one of these people who I'm on the other side of the research field. Everyone's freaking out, but I'm like, hey, hold on. Let's make sure our knee-jerk reactions are, lining up with science. But there's some good stuff in the medical literature about this. They're not so good at whenever they try to look at like psychological epidemiology, they're pretty sloppy. But still, there's some good preliminary research from their side. Not that medical researchers are bad; they're really good at researching medical stuff. They would blow me away. But when it comes to psychological principles, they just don't understand like the small nuances and the important variables and the unimportant variables. So they just kind of throw everything in and just go, I don't know this. So anyway, but it's pretty scary. Like some of the implications.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've seen it in my own anecdotal experience. Like my brother will be, or my sister will be driving somewhere with kids in the car, and what do you do to keep them quiet? You give them an iPad, and they play
Yep.
on that for the trip.
Yeah.
Now, what if on the iPad there was Reading Rainbow app, the #1 educational app, with
That'd be great.
15 million different books that they can read and watch?
Now, with $5 million, here's my only concern here, because I think, oh, that's amazing. I mean, Reading Rainbow's great. I can't think of any downsides, and it's publicly funded, so it's not like it's going to flop. This is good. Well, if you had $5 million, why don't you just make a new Reading Rainbow? Because it's really dated, you know?
Oh yeah,
Like,
they are. They are. Well, they're gonna take the. I mean, some things are dated, some things aren't. Like books, like Hello Moon or whatever, like Goodnight Moon.
yeah,
Like those are still being read every day. I think they're gonna add more books to it, like newer ones that they're reading, but not a lot changes with children's books. Like it's a pretty slow growing field as far as like we're still reading the same books our parents read.
yeah.
But
I was just thinking, like, as far as like, okay, so nowadays our cinematography and stuff is a little different. Like, we have more vivid colors, more crisp images, things like that, and also like we have a different pacing that we do a lot of things. So I'm afraid that the kids are gonna be like, I don't want to watch it when there's this other sweet one. I don't know. I'm just imagining.
yeah,
I don't
I
know.
don't know. I don't know if they're going to update it or not. I mean, they've got the funds to do a lot. I know a lot of the funds are going to go to providing this stuff to underprivileged schools for free,
Hmm.
but some of it is just going to be like making it go out to more platforms. Like the idea is to be everywhere, so all kids have access to it, starting
Yeah,
with the ones who don't have access to things.
that's great.
So yeah, it seems like a pretty worthy cause. I mean, especially like you said, 20% more screen time. Instead of fighting that, let's use that screen time for something helpful.
Absolutely. Although, I do have some concerns about like a lot of our I mean, is this still relevant though? I don't know, because social skills are going down. I would imagine if people aren't engaging each other. Like if you're engaging with a device, and you see this happen a lot, like people in like a lot of settings. Like me and my wife went out for a nice pleasant brunch at this local place that's really good. But we looked down the bar. We were sitting at the bar. It's kind of like a little soda jerk type of joint. It's really cool. And she's like, look down the bar, look. And if you look all the way down the bar, everyone had their phone out. Everyone, and they were in pairs. They weren't alone. And so I was like, yeah, that is kind of. I mean, they're clearly not socializing, and socializing is a skill, so that's bad. But on the other hand, what if they were like tweeting or writing to someone on Facebook? That still is a pretty good development of social skills, just very specific ones. And
Right.
I don't know, like, yeah.
By the way, listeners, can you guess Jeremiah's race and economic class by the fact that he just went to brunch with his wife?
Jerk. You're mean.
White people love brunch.
We do love ourselves some brunch, man.
I think
Can
that's
legally get out of
stuff
bed.
white people love.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Blog or
Website.
Tumblr or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that thrown in my face in an internet debate recently. That was weird. I was talking about that.
Your male privilege.
Yeah, well, somebody, it was completely unrelated because I mean I understand when they say it's related like that, obviously. Well, yeah, brunch. I mean that is pretty typical of my characterized or my stereotype, but some guy said it. He just said, "Let me just point this out. How do you think people of color look at someone like you who's so good looking and wealthy?" And I was like, first of all, I think people would disagree with you are good looking. I know some people who would. Second of all, wealthy. I'm a grad student. And he said, and what else? You're something and some kind of privilege. He said, how do you think we take to stuff like this? And I was like, I'm not really sure. All I did was provide a couple citations. I'm not like I'm in no way attacking your race, and I'm sorry. I mean, if it's you had to have clicked my profile picture or hovered over it. Otherwise, that's the great thing about the internet is that all opinions are created equal.
Yeah.
So, it's also the bad thing, but anyway, I was like, why is that? That seems really incidental here. Because there will be times where it's incidental, right? And there'll be times where it's appropriate. And some people are really bad at understanding the difference between those two, and they err on one side or the other. I see it. Anyway.
It'd be great to live in a place where that's not such a go-to card to play, but like we were talking about this on the Facebook page where we're like, someone just played a video game. At the very end, they unveiled like the character you're playing was black. It was like inside of a spacesuit or something, so you never saw his face. Mm-hmm. And the guy was like, "Yeah, so." Like it was just kind of like, almost like a post-racial world at that point because he's just like, it doesn't really matter. It's like he also mentioned playing The Walking Dead. Like you're like, oh wait, I'm playing a black guy, but like you don't even think about that while you're playing it. You just know that you're playing an awesome history professor who fights zombies.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So. Yeah, or LeVar Burton of Reading Rainbow fame is actually black, but it's like the last thing I think of when I think of LeVar Burton. I think of Star Trek, I think of Community cameos, I think of Reading Rainbow. So I think we're kind of going in the right direction. I mean, and sometimes it is. Sometimes race does come into play, and it should be brought out. But just like using it as like, oh yeah, well that's just what white people would say. It seems like a cop out in an argument.
And it's also racist against me. Like you're stereotyping me. Like I am not a typical like white person, and I'm definitely not a typical. And you may not be. I don't know.
And what is a typical white person, right? Like it's just.
Well, I think they're thinking of like 2.5 kids. Like when you say a typical American.
you have exactly that many kids.
I do.
Because you have a dog, so we're gonna count that as the 0.5.
2.5 cars. I don't have that, but. I have a Doge, David. It's not a dog.
It's a Doge.
A tiny Doge. Look at that Doge. Look at this little tail. Anyway,
yeah. Anyway, Reading Rainbow coming to a gaming console near you.
Yeah, I expect all of you to put down all of your video games and watch hours and hours of that. So.
No, but if you have kids and you're concerned about the future of education, maybe kickstart some money towards this. Seems like a pretty good cause.
Definitely, and I plan on using it as far as my console is also my media center. So the kids don't know the difference if I fire up Netflix, Amazon, or the Amazon Prime Instant Video thing, or the stream it from my computer back in my room, or if I just click over on the Reading Rainbow app. So it makes sense.
Right, and I don't want to get too tempting, but if you pledge a certain amount of money, figure what it is. But LeVar Burton will leave you a personalized voicemail.
That's awesome. Say something Star Trek related, I guess. So with me, there's a couple news points, and this is from our buddy Chris Ferguson, C-Ferg, friend of the show. He posted a couple links. This is kind of science news, but he's talking about he's showing. Okay, so he and I have been having this conversation on Twitter about the importance of replication in science, and how it's not getting done, and then how we need to police our own and especially in social science where there's a lot of variables and a lot of noise, as we call it.
Replication being doing the same experiment someone else did to make sure you get the same results, or replication being cloning dinosaurs?
The latter, of course. This is psychology, people.
Right.
No, the former. And so, we were having this conversation of do we want that? Another one idea is registering, which means before you run your study, you have to register in the journal and say, this is my hypothesis, and these are the measures I'm examining, and nothing else. And when you do that, because what happens is a lot of times, and I think this pisses me off, but it happens a lot. People just data mine. This is what we call it, data mining, where you just kind of start running analyses randomly. Well, the reason why that's stupid is because the way that this works, when you cite p is less than 0.05 or p is less than 0.01, whatever. I won't get into the statistics of it, but basically that means the probability that it's I don't want to oversimplify. Okay, yeah, no, I will. It just means the probability that it's just by chance. The differences just because of the sample we took, they just happen to look different, but they're not, right?
Uh-huh.
So that's what that means. Well, the way probability works is if you do it 100 times, well, you might find one like that or five like that if you're using p less than 0.05. That so when people data mine, they run a bunch of analyses and they're increasing their chance of that error, that type of error. And
Right.
so they're putting out bad science because they're just mining their data because they're too lazy to go collect more. And so anyway, that's the big thing. And he put up a couple. Since we had the conversation, he's been looking for replications of video game violence, the link between the violent media and the video games, the violent video games, or sorry, and the violent behavior.
Mm.
And he put up a few people getting non-replications, which is weird. Like most journals, if you say, "Hey, I got no results," and you give it to them, they won't publish it. So, so we don't get to see a lot of dissenting voices. But anyway, so it's pretty interesting. Just so you guys know that the research is still being done, and yeah, it's kind of a problem. So be sensitive to that when you're like posting, articles of psychology or any other science that's an antithesis to the kind of the consensus of what science says. But I don't know how many people are doing that. I'm just putting that out there.
The
Yeah.
more you know.
Oh no! The most important one. This is a big one. Okay, have you heard this? People with kids or people who know anyone with kids, have you heard this? Don't give them that sugar; it'll hype them up.
Yes, everyone's heard that.
Yeah. Do you think that's true?
I'm gonna have to go with no.
Yeah. As it turns out, no. It's well known in the medical literature that it's not, right?
Hmm.
And so, and no matter how many times I say that to parents, right? Because I work with parents sometimes, and I say, hey, yeah, actually, it doesn't matter. They're like, oh, I didn't want to give them a candy bar before this, and I was like, well, if it's not chocolate, which has caffeine, then it actually doesn't matter. And they're like, oh, yes, it does. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. And they're like, no, yes, it does. I'm like, I know anecdotally it feels like it does. It's called a self-fulfilling prophecy. But as it turns out, we've measured this a lot of times, or the medical folks have, mostly, and it's all, there's absolutely no difference. It's literally a placebo that dictates it. So if we tell them we fed them sugar, they think it worked. If we tell them we fed them non-sugar, then they think that they're calmer, and there's absolutely no difference actually when you look at the actual difference. So
Yeah, it's one of those like common myths that's hard to kill. Like
it is.
like the literary equivalent would be like you cannot end a preposition or end a sentence with a preposition.
Right. Well, dang it, I was going to try to say what do you mean with while ending in a preposition somehow, but I'm not clever enough. So what do you
It's
mean?
like well, there's that there's a Winston Churchill. I don't think he actually said this, but it's attributed to him where he says, "This is the kind of aired pedantry up with which I will not put." But basically, it's just one of those legends that, like, because I think in the Latin that was a rule. Like, you couldn't end a sentence in a preposition, and somehow people were like, that applies to English too, but it doesn't. You can totally end a sentence with a preposition, but you do it, some idiot on the internet is going to, like, grammar Nazi call you out on it, and you're going to sidetrack the whole conversation. So I usually avoid doing it just to avoid that whole sidetrack.
Mm-hmm.
But as a literary guy, that's my credential, literary guy. It says on my wall. Let me just tell you all, you absolutely can end a sentence with a preposition.
Oh yeah, you linked me a bunch of citations on that.
Ton of citations. The Oxford English Dictionary.
Well, I felt the same way. Like when you said it, you were like, you can end a sentence in a preposition. I was like, wow, that sounds, I don't know, David. And I instantly started doubting, even though I knew you were like, this is what you do. And I was like, well, and then I was like, well, okay, no, let's see it. And then you started citing. And like most people should, I changed my opinion after I saw the citations. I thought, oh, well, all right, look, those are credible citations. These are the folks who run like how grammar works. So, all right, sounds good to me. Like,
if there's an Académie Française equivalent for English, like, these are the people I was citing.
yeah, right. And they were pretty like unequivocal about it. They weren't just like, well, you can if you want. They're like, yeah, it's completely like, or it's kind of worthless. Like people, this law or this rule, it's not a rule at all.
Yeah. Shakespeare does it all the time. Chaucer, like, tons of classic literature ends in prepositions. It's fine, but it's just one of those things. It's one of those things that people always want to call you out on because they're like, yeah, call you out on. There's a sentence with a preposition, like. They just love to pounce on things like that, and it's all the more irritating because they're so wrong. So if somebody ever does that to you, just be like, actually no, and then just Google like ending as a preposition. You can easily prove them wrong. It's not a debate. So
Awesome.
We got off on a tangent there, but sometimes I get to rant. And that's one of mine.
Yeah. Well, cool. Yeah, I definitely take my fair share. Anything else in the news?
Yeah, actually, so D&D fifth edition, or
Yeah.
D&D Next, the new D&D. They're just calling it Dungeons and Dragons. The pricing has been announced. It's coming out in August, I believe, and you can pre-order them right now on Amazon. The prices for the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual, and the Dungeon Master's Guide are $50 each, so a bit of a price point to get in.
Mm.
But if you pre-order them on Amazon, they're like 40% off, so that's nice. But here's the interesting thing. They're making a starter box, like an intro, everything you need to get to play, like an adventure, some pre-gens, some pre-generated characters, some dice, like rules for levels 1 through 5. That's going to be about $20.
Oh, wow.
Still kind of pricey, right? Like,
Yeah.
but here's the other cool thing. Wizards has announced they're going to have a basic set, like a basic rule set that just has like elf, dwarf, halfling, human, fighter, mage, cleric, thief. But all the rules you need to play is those guys, levels 1 through whatever, 20 or 30 or however far they're going. All the rules, basic set, everything you need to play for those, free PDF.
Wow.
Yeah,
That is
so
awesome.
that will be good to get people to try it out, you know. And then if you
Yeah.
really like it, you can buy the game. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that they're doing different price points. There was an article out, and I'll just go this real briefly so we can move on. But there's an article out about the I think the word they use is asinine nature of the $60 price point.
Hmm.
Uh, and there's been a lot of there's a new market now, and those in marketing, like I know some of our listeners are in that, and I used to be in that. I took a couple classes, not that I'm an expert, but they talked about the kind of conceptualize like a 2D space, like with an X and Y axis, and you've got on one axis you've got price. Right? Is that right? Okay, yeah, this is where I'm gonna probably say something stupid, but the concept is still there. But basically, you got like price and you got quality, and so like some people want high quality with low price. A lot of people do actually, but you want to shoot your product at like a certain spot that isn't already overlapped by another product, right? So like the $60 price point, what they said in game development was you need to, if you're gonna sell a $60 game point, you need the consumer to see it as like a $200 game.
Right.
Because otherwise, everybody does what? What do you do when a $60 game comes out that you don't absolutely have to have right now?
Oh, wait for it to go on sale.
Right, and so many people are doing that. They're selling it lower. So it's just it's artificially like catering to that lower price point already. So yeah, it kind of makes me think of what you were talking about.
Exactly. This will be because the first one I heard I was like $50. That's going to turn people off to the hobby. No one's going to want to try it out. But then they have like different ways to get into it. They have like the intro set. They have the full rules. They have the free set. Like it's really brilliant. I like the way they're doing that. I'm excited now.
That's great. That's great.
And one more bit of news comes to us from a listener, I believe. This one is about everyone's favorite radio host turned media mogul, Glenn Beck.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is from me actually. I posted it on the Game 3 podcast.
Okay, I saw it on the Facebook page. I wasn't sure who posted it.
Yeah.
Why don't you cover it?
Okay, yeah. And by the way, I post a lot of stuff on Twitter. A lot of it's more academic, but some of it isn't. Some of it's just straight up hilarious. But this was one of them. And it's basically Glenn. There's this new game that came out. If you are into games, you probably are if you're listening to the podcast.
Yeah. Even if you're not into games, you've probably seen ads for this everywhere.
Watch Dogs. Yeah, and it's something that I've watched for a while, and I actually don't think it's going to be that great, but I haven't followed it in like half a year because I got on the early hype. It's about people who like this guy who's got like he can hack into other people's electronic devices, and how powerful that is. You kind of get to realize like, oh, look, I can just like that guy on a cell phone is texting. I don't know, his wife to check his bank account, things like that, and you can just like kind of hack into all that stuff. That was the original premise, and I think they still stick to that. Anyway, apparently there's a radio show host called Glenn Beck, which many people I think are familiar with, however you feel about him, and he went on this huge rant. I posted it up there of him talking about how this game is teaching people how to hack, man. So it's teaching our youngsters how to hack. It's horrible.
Right.
The world's worst thing ever.
And we're probably going to have to take a soundbite from this to put into our in-depth analysis because he starts off the thing with a huge Call of Duty, like violent video games cause mass shootings rant that is just perfect for what we're going to be discussing later. So if you like to see the media not understand how video games work, check out Glenn Beck talking about Watch Dogs.
Yeah, check it out. It's pretty lulzy. You guys will have a good time, especially with you're familiar with my rants on violent video games. So, yeah, you should just check it out. It's good. Yeah. But I think that's all the news, right?
Yeah.
Okay, then let's move into the gaming experiences. All right, gaming experiences. Okay, okay. I know you just got paid, so I imagine that you bought some games.
Yeah, yesterday was payday, so I dressed up like Tony Stark and just went through town throwing cash at people and
Yeah,
women hanging on my arm. It was great.
right.
Yeah, I did. Okay, you were talking about $60 price points. That's how
Yeah.
much this game I just bought was. Mario Kart 8.
Whoa, I didn't know they were up to 8.
Yeah, they've been Mario Karting it up. Mario Kart 7 was on the 3DS, and
Yeah. So
so
tell me about not only this game, but the draw of this game. Like, why is it popular with so many people?
this game, first of all, beautiful. Like it really
Really?
pushes, like, it really uses that HD graphics that the Wii U can do that people were bitching about that the Wii couldn't do.
Yeah.
Like this game looks great. It's beautiful. It's a Mario Kart game like any other, but just super fun. Just racing around. Shoot, I can't even describe a great review of it, except that it's just fun Mario Karting. Now, why did I buy it yesterday and not wait for it to go on sale like in a couple of years?
Hmm.
Well, Nintendo is aware of this $60 price point being so formidable, and they said, "Okay, guys, we know you're all going to wait until it goes on sale, but what about this? You buy this game now, we'll throw in another game for free."
For
And
free.
now suddenly the game is $35 or $30 or something because I'm getting another one for free, which
Yeah.
made it totally affordable and gave me kind of a time-sensitive nature of needing to purchase it while the promotion was going on. So I bought it, and I also got Super Mario Brothers Wii U for free.
Nice. Have you ever played that?
No,
Ah.
I
What
played
are your
the one
thoughts?
on the Wii, and I played the one on the 3DS, but this is the first time I played it on the Wii U, and it's fun so far. Like there's these little challenge modes where you can like put your Mii out there, like your little Mii becomes Mario,
Oh,
and
really?
yeah, so you like run around with your face on Mario's body, taking out challenges, and then they've got the normal game, like which is supposed to be fun multiplayer. I live in crippling loneliness, so I don't have any roommates.
Still crushing depression.
Soul Crushing Depression is the name of the game, so it's just me playing. But yeah, I'm looking forward to playing a multiplayer when I go home for summer.
That'd be cool, man. Yeah, bring that over here if you can when
I
you come
shall.
visit.
I
Yeah,
shall
that'd be
indeed.
good. Uh,
So yeah,
yeah.
I'll bring that and Mario Kart 8, which again, the only problem with Mario Kart 8, the cool thing is you can upload your races, like it makes highlight reels of each race. You can set to what it wants to focus on, like which drivers, or
Oh.
like focus on using items, or focus on really cool spins, or where I pass somebody. And it makes like a best of highlights reel, and you can actually upload that to what they call Mario Kart UTV, where you can upload it directly to YouTube from your Wii U. So you can have like a little YouTube channel of your best Mario Kart moments.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it bodes well for Smash Brothers when they come out. If they have something similar, that would be really cool.
That's awesome. That's
'Cause I
awesome.
remember telling you I got these games, and you're like, "Oh, make sure to stream them," and I'm like, "I can't because it's not a computer game."
Well, I'm
But
really excited to talk about the or what? Sorry, totally cut you off. Were you done?
no, yeah, I was just gonna say I'd give Mario Kart 8 probably an 8 out of 10. Definitely, if you like
Really?
Mario Kart games, check it out.
Okay. And does it have still more of that, like where you're driving around in those like crazy tracks where you're bouncing off mushrooms and stuff?
It's got everything. I just did the Rainbow Road last night, and it's
Oh God.
amazing. So
Oh
beautiful.
God.
It's
Rainbow
got
Road.
anti-gravity tracks now. So like you'll be driving, and there'll be something that turns your car into a hover car, and you can drive on the walls and the ceilings and stuff.
Sweet.
It's so fun.
That's those guys,
It's
man.
just chaos, and it's great.
Those guys just figured out how to like what fun is, and they always like somehow seem to get it. It's weird because they're not monopolizing on any of the other variables. It's just clearly just fun, you know.
Yeah,
But
I don't think there's any science to it. There's like, let's have a fun, and they make
yeah, yeah, because they're Italian. But
fun.
let's have a fun in Japan. Let's have a
Fun. Eat some sushi.
Is that how you're gonna speak when you're in Japan? When you're speaking
Drink some
Japanese?
sake. Yeah, I've been taking Japanese lessons, man. That's how they speak.
Oh, okay. I don't know. No, I'm excited to talk about the next one, which is Edge of the Empire.
More
Way
Edge
more.
of the Empire.
Yeah, the tabletop role-playing game, and we talked about it last episode, and we got to play more of it this time, and it was super fun. Now that we have a rounded-out party, like, I think the biggest principle is this: we talk about immersion. There's actually an episode we did on it a while back.
Hmm.
Immersion, and like one of the principles we said we were going to explicitly do this time was stay immersed in our character, right?
Right. Less out of character chatter.
Right.
So like an example would be like, what would you say an out of character interaction would be?
So that would be hey, John, which is one of the actual players' names, not or the actual person's name, not his player. So I say, hey, John, does your character have does he have negotiation? Because mine has coercion. Can I use coercion on this guy, or what do you want to do?
Right. And that's kind of how we played our first time, and it wasn't that great.
Yeah. But an in-character type RP, which this is like real nerd language here, but this is I'm just trying to let you guys know. And for those who already know, then you can head nod here. Is you say like John's character's name was Valentin, so I would say, which sounds like Valentine, but I'd say, hey, Valentin, I'm thinking about just going and making this guy, see my point of view. Just kind of showing him the guns, like just go at it. Like coercion is like, where you forcibly get someone to believe something. So I say hey Valentin, I'm getting sick of this guy's shit. I'm ready to just tell him if he doesn't do it, I'm gonna put this blaster in his face, And then he would respond with his negotiation, which is actually it's not exactly true, but with negotiation, he would be like, oh, let me try a softer approach first. So that would be like in character RP roleplay.
Right.
And it adds to the immersion. Like out of character is fun because of like 4th edition, for example, D&D. It's very like systems based, I guess.
Yeah, like, it's very kind of systemic and very tactical. So
yeah,
there's a lot of abstractions in that game, right? Like I'm gonna use power attack. I can only do it once per encounter. Like why?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the rule of the game.
Yeah. So coming from that point of view, it's really fun from like top down, almost like you're playing with real miniatures on a table. It's like that, it's clearly a game about tactics and board space, whereas this is totally different. Like there's no maps. It's just like kind of describing, what's going on. So it's really fun, and it immerses you, and it makes it more fun because the decision you make as your character is part of the fun part, fleshing them out. It's like Walking Dead, where you're going to make decisions that define your character.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun.
And we were also able to add a new player to the group last time. One of our listeners, Sean, who's contributed to the show more than once, he jumped in on the game, and it really added something. I think he was playing a veteran character that he played in an old campaign, so it was he had this kind of like grizzled veteran kind of thing going on, and it kind of adds some gravitas to the party.
Yeah, definitely. Because we before were just bumbling with our crappy skills, but we were able to change our skills around a little this time, to make it a little more how we were clearly playing our characters out. But
right.
We'll get into that like in the in-depth section, I think.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, looking forward to another. Like the hardest thing about Edge of the Empire is just getting everyone together to play it.
Yeah, we've got people who can only play on the weekends. We have other people who are like, oh, weekends aren't great for me for whatever reason. So it's weird. But what else? What else have you been playing?
Play a little Bastion.
Oh yeah, old school, man. That's indie RPG. Indie action RPG?
Yeah, it came out. I don't know when, but it was on sale for like 80% off. It was like $250.
Wow.
So I went ahead and picked it up, and it's fun. It's not blowing me away fun, but it's fun to have a grizzled cowboy narrator telling you what's going on as you're doing it, and the gameplay is pretty tight, just rolling around, counterattacking, and I don't know. It's just it's a fun little time waster.
Yeah.
It's not a game I can play with a podcast on because I miss all the cool narrator stuff.
Yeah, it's that's kind of how I felt about it. People went nuts about the game, and I think it is. It's a great indie game. I love it. I'll totally get behind it. But it didn't blow me away. Like I was just like, it's cool having the narrator, and I love the feel of it. But the story wasn't so amazing that I was like, wow,
right.
Incredible. It was a little weird.
It's got some fun little complexities, like you can customize your weapons and your skills, and you can customize what weapons you bring into battle, and you can do little like side missions to unlock more things. It's got all those things that I like as a completionist,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, again, it's definitely worth $2.50. I don't know if I would have wanted to pay $15 for it, but it's fun. I'm having fun with it.
Well, this is the first week that I've had, one of the first weeks where I haven't had to work at all after 5 p.m. and do something at home. Like I normally have to crank things out because I turned in all this paperwork I needed to turn in, and I finished a couple projects, and I was like, oh man, I've got an evening free. So I've been playing a lot of games. I even played the next game that those people who made Bastion made next, and it's called Transistor. It's pretty fun. I only got to play probably about an hour of it, but it's fun. It's like an action RPG, kind of like that, except you could pause time and then assign like sort of like a tactical RPG where it's just turn-based. So it's really fun. So it's a combination of those two, and I don't know, it's interesting, and it has a narrator too, just like the old one, and it's of course beautiful, great art style, just like that one. So I think I'm really gonna enjoy it. I only played an hour of it. Additionally, I played Broken Age. You've heard of that? It's
It's
okay.
like a kind of a storytelling game.
Yeah, it's by those one of the big indie companies called Double Fine.
It's weird how we're getting big indie companies now.
I know. There's clearly a need for it, man. So they've done pretty well. But they do well with like stories and stuff. But there's no like big decisions you have to make. The dialogue options are like you just click them in random order almost because you're gonna get through all of them. There's no
Oh yeah, it's like an old RPG where it's like, do you want to ask me anything else? And you click all the questions, and then
yeah.
no thanks, that's enough for now.
Yep. So it's not that interesting that way. But there's a lot of like little. They're really good at making little charming games, so it's pretty charming so far. And you know that the two stories are going to come together somehow because you're playing two different perspectives, and so that's going to be the big part, I think, where it's going to be super fun. But right now, it's just kind of a charming thing. And my weirdness with like voice actors, it makes the game really fun because there's a lot of weird cameos. Like Jack Black was in there, but he's trying to disguise his voice, and I was like, no, you don't. That's you.
You're Jack Black.
Yeah. But but the big one I played, oh man, I streamed some of it too actually last night. Was Lords of Shadow, Mirror of Fate. They put it out in HD format for computer and other consoles now.
Now that's the one that came out on the 3DS before?
Yeah, you should play it, dude.
I literally reviewed it on this very show. But tell me your thoughts on it.
It's great, man. It's so good. You should definitely play it. Oh man, the storyline's awesome. I love Castlevania. Just as soon as it started, I was like, just yes. I love the setting.
You walk up and you're like, oh, you're Simon Belmont.
Yeah, or even when you start out as Gabriel, and he's got that cloak on.
Yeah.
It shows him use that blood magic. Oh man, like the whole thing's just. I like Castlevania, and I really love how they re jump started the world.
Mm-hmm. A little reboot.
Yeah, reboot. That's a much better way to say it. Thanks. Yeah, it's a really cool game, and it's basically just a platformer, just like the old school ones, but prettier and with really cool characters, great voice acting, and a cool art style.
Yeah, I do like the art style. How far have you gotten into it? What chapter are you in?
Here's what sucks, man. Oh man, I just started Act 3 where you become Alucard, and but here's what happens. There's apparently a very rare game-breaking glitch. That what happens is if your DS runs out of batteries, or now if your computer just turns off, and they haven't fixed this yet, but during the cutscene, and apparently it's high probability that you would do this because it's loading something in the background that is kind of glitchy. Mm-hmm. Well, as it's showing that Alucard scene, which I won't talk about, it's my computer crashed, and I was like, oh, okay, no big deal, restarted it. But then it starts you as Simon Belmont in a whole different part. I think it's probably supposed to be another act. And I was like, what? I thought it was Alucard. It says Act 3, Alucard. So I start running around, and you're able to play just fine. But then you get to this one door of a huge chapel, and you can't go in.
Oh, man, that sucks.
I know. I have to redo the whole act now, whole Act 2. That sucks. That's literally all of what Simon Belmont was. So that sucks because I was really enjoying that game, and I was really looking forward to playing it today. But that was like 6 hours of gameplay, probably.
So. I know, especially if you're like me and you're like that game is really easy to be a completionist in because it tells you each what percentage you've got on each level of all the stuff you're supposed to find.
Yeah, and you put like little notes, on the map.
Little notes like come back here when you get the whip upgrade.
Yeah, and they have done really well like transitioning it. Well, actually, I played it on the with a gamepad, but they did really well transitioning the two screens to one and making that totally different interface. Like, still work pretty well.
Yeah, that was one of those things where the two screens were useful because you could just look at the map on the bottom. Yeah. But yeah, really fun game. Highly recommended, and just so much good. So much good.
Well, I say that. You haven't played it
yet. Hey, speaking of games that we've both played now, I finished this week Child of Light.
You did?
Yeah, so now we can finally talk about it.
Oh man, are we going to spoil it? What if we just say there's spoilers?
Okay, spoiler warning, there are spoilers ahead.
Yeah, so what did you make of the ending? Or like the whole story?
Okay, so the whole story, I liked it. It left enough things vague that you didn't have to, you could fill in the blanks in your head,
Yeah.
And like I'm not one of those people that needs everything explained, right? Like I don't need every single loose end tied up. Like where did the stepmother come from? Why are their stepdaughters dragons? Like I'm just like, oh, they came from fairy tale world, and they hinted at stuff like in their background, and so I was pretty satisfied with that.
Yeah.
And then the,
Okay.
the ending with the flooding and stuff, and it's like, okay, well that didn't actually happen in real life, but whatever. It's a cool little ending.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I saw it as like she okay, so the story starts when she's on her deathbed, basically.
Hmm.
And then her dad starts dying away too. And as you find out that the stepmom actually poisoned them, or that's the like a story fairy tale kind of
Yeah.
explanation of it inside this fairy tale world. And it's very dreamlike. So obviously it's like, okay, so she's either dead, possibly, or she's in a dream, like, like a coma, basically.
Hmm.
And it kind of hints at that quite a bit. She's like, oh, I just want to wake up, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And she's playing it through. But then I see it as she is actually in the coma for quite a while, and her dad. Does he die? I think he dies.
Yeah.
It's not really clear.
Yeah, he
Or, no,
does.
or that's clear, but I mean it's not clear which parts are just the fairy tale explanation, or how much of it is not.
Right.
But the way a lot of like dreams work, is it uses real people, and then it just kind of like takes creative license with it,
Right.
So
Like
like
the Wizard of Oz. And you were there, and you were there, and you were there.
exactly, yeah, that's what it reminds me of, the Wizard of Oz.
Mm.
And then yeah, I think she learns how to lead inside of this dream, and she becomes, because as a child she says, oh, I'm just a kid, I can't lead, basically,
Mm.
and then she gets this truth. But how would you train someone how to lead if they're a kid and they don't know they can? First of all, I would let them, like slowly introduce people to them, and then say, oh, look, you can lead these people, and they would be like people with, first people that need you a lot, and then people that are a little more dependent, and that's
Mm.
kind of what you find. First, it's like a sad clown who's
Hmm.
like, she's like, oh, please let me come with you, and later it's like a massive like anti-darkness demon,
Hmm.
you know. And then I would say, but then there's still something holding back, saying, I'm just a kid, I can't lead. Well, then
And
I would
then,
like have you grow up.
yeah.
Yeah, so then you get comfortable leading in those shoes, and then yeah, so I think it was really cool because it seemed like a tale to teach her to take the mantle that her father was dropping, you
Yeah.
know, and it was really cool. 'Cause then she ends, and obviously, then the ending is like, oh, did she wake up from the coma and like become the princess, like, or the queen,
Yeah, it
or
was left really vague. Like, or did she die? Like, is the whole thing
yeah,
just her dying?
yeah, it's beautiful. I
Yeah,
love
and
it.
the death thing, like, it's the whole game's kind of melancholy, right? Like, it's kind of sad
Yeah.
piano music and darkness, and like, I don't know, it's just a really sad, mysterious game that doesn't tie up any loose ends and doesn't really need to.
I know. I mean, it's just like the theme is so beautifully, like you said, with the music, the art style, and everything, and then the rhyming too. It's just, I think it all was perfect, and I can't believe there's haters. I mean, I know there will be, but so many
Mm.
haters.
Yeah.
But
So
okay.
anyway, I would recommend it. I think it's definitely a fun game. One of my friends gave it to me as a
Oh,
kid.
who?
Oh, just one of my fellow co-hosts.
Oh man. Well, can't really narrow that down very much, but sounds like a really good guy.
Yeah, yeah, it was an anonymous donation. I don't want to embarrass him,
Okay.
but
Good thinking.
yeah.
That's awesome. I also got Lords of Shadow 2, by the way, and because they were having an Amazon sale, I posted it on the Game Theory
The Mayhem
podcast
sale.
thing.
We mentioned it last episode, I think.
That's right. Yeah, we talked about it here too. So mayhem. So yeah, I got that in the whole bundle of the new Castlevania things. It's exactly what I've been waiting for them to all come out on sale, and then especially if they're all at the same time. So super
Yeah.
cheap, really cool. Can't wait to replay Mirror of Fate. I'm playing them in chronological order. So
Okay.
anyway, cool. Yeah, I guess that's all the games I played.
Yeah, it's been a game-filled week, which is pretty typical of summer vacation for me.
I hate you.
Education.
Yeah, the pay isn't great, but you get a summer off. Well, all right. Let's move into the in-depth analysis. In-depth analysis. For those of you just joining us, this is episode 40. We are talking about narrative RPGs and ideologies. Yeah, so welcome to the show for those who did not listen to the intro portion. And to those who did, welcome back.
Yeah, if you missed the intro portion, you're missing out. Jeremiah described a lot of his bodily illnesses and medication.
Yes, that was clearly the highlight of it. We talked about some cool stuff, and we got a chance to play a lot of games, so we
Yeah.
kind of go over them. It was fun.
It was good. But now we're talking about the world's oldest profession.
Prostitution.
Yes. And the world's oldest hobby, storytelling.
Wait, are we really talking about prostitution?
No, I just like to make world's oldest jokes. No, we're actually talking, but when you think about it, storytelling is the world's oldest hobby. It's what we did before we invented stickball.
Yeah, it's true. It's
And
true.
other games.
Why do you think that is? Why do we like to hear about stories?
I don't know. Why do we like? I know we like to hear about stories, but what if I'm looking at it through an evolutionary biology lens, I'd
Yeah.
have to say that stories are a way for us to gather experience points or just experiences without actually exposing ourselves to any risk, so we can still vicariously learn lessons, right? So like instead of like what's one of the stories mothers tell their kids about the four little monkeys jumping on the bed, one fell off, and what happened?
He bumped his head.
Right, and then we only had three monkeys jumping on the bed. Now, before that story existed, kids would just have to jump on their bed before they figured out that that was a dangerous activity. But
Hmm.
thanks to storytelling, we can kind of teach these lessons and like primitive. Let's say like we just figured out language, right? Like we're a very primitive species at this point. We just figured out language. We know that there are woolly mammoths, and that if you surround them, you have a better chance of taking them down, right?
Right.
Now, a good way to teach that lesson is to teach a lesson about like four brothers who were individually too weak to stand on their own, but together they beat a dragon
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
whatever, a monster. And so I think there is an evolutionary advantage to telling stories as a species because it helps us pass on like accumulated wisdom beyond following example, like beyond the mimetic learning of just like watching the jaguar kill something, then the cub learns how to do it. Like we can
Hmm.
actually do that narratively.
Yeah, that's funny how this is something that ACT looks at a lot, or specifically a small portion of an ACT kind of branch of research. It's called relational frame theory, RFT, and it examines how a language has totally changed how we interact with our environment, and in a lot of good ways, but some bad ways too.
Mhm.
Um, and we'll talk about that in a second. Remember that part, what I just said. And whenever I'm going to talk about something later called the behavioral inhibition system versus the behavioral activation system, and we'll kind of tie those together. But right now, yeah, I looked at it through that's really interesting. I don't know why I hadn't thought of that, but I was thinking through a psychological lens, which is we've got this thing that's empathy, which we've talked about that in previous podcasts, but basically it's something that we've got that makes a lot of sense as far as communal creatures. We need to be able to protect other people in our group because we need to maintain our enough people. So it makes sense that we need to protect the number of people in our group, their health and well-being whenever we can. Well, how do you do that other than you need to pump up or pump down that central nervous system whenever it's appropriate, whenever somebody else should get theirs pumped up or pumped down. And this happens with like distress calls with like animals and things like that, or a crying baby is the same thing here. It agitates people, right? Because it's producing something called clinically anxiety, which just means it's a physiological reaction, but the conceptualization is that it presses you to do something, and if you
Right.
don't do something, you get more agitated.
Right.
So yeah, so that's the same thing with like a crying baby on the plane. You should just thank your evolutionary history. Don't get mad at the baby, because that's good that you feel that way. You're supposed to. Oh yeah, and the baby's frequency, the frequency with which they cry. And I actually don't know this from scientific literature, so keep that in mind, guys. I could be wrong. I read that it was like it's with the certain bandwidth that like really like agitates our brains, and that they've recreated it with certain white noises, and people fucking hate it. They hate it. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So narrative RPGs. What is a narrative RPG?
All right. So RPGs, role-playing games, we've talked about them before on the show. These are games where you take on a character, right?
Yeah.
And instead of saying like, what would Jeremiah do in this situation, you're saying, what would Sinford do, or Edgeblade kill, or whatever character you're playing.
Right. So
And
kind of like an actor like would need to do for their person, right?
yeah, it's almost like improv, right? Like you
Yeah.
don't have a script, but you do have your motivations, and you're supposed to act within something consistent to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like a role-playing game, you'll have one person who's setting the stage, usually called the GM or the DM or the narrator or something, and his job is basically to everything else in the world beyond that the characters that the players are playing, he controls or she controls.
Right.
And there's usually some kind of it's not that different from when you're on the playground, you're doing this with your friends. We're like, all right, okay, we're playing a game. Like I'm gonna be the knight, and you're gonna be the ninja or whatever you're into at the time.
Or cops and robbers for normal kids.
Yeah, sure. Cops and robbers, ninjas and knights. But when you were a kid, did you ever start adding like rules to it? You know, like to settle disputes. Like, oh, you're
Yeah.
dead. No, you're not dead. Okay, fine. If you get hit by this rock, you're dead. You know, and then now we're throwing rocks at each other.
Yeah, and anecdotally, I don't know if this is the case, but it seems like girls do that more. Yeah, like they
Come up with rule
like
systems.
set up with systems. Yeah, yeah. Just watching other people's kids, I don't know for sure, but
Yeah, I don't know
yeah,
either, but that'd be interesting to study.
but they do it.
Right, and that's kind of where role-playing games come in, right? Because it's a lot of it's make-believe, but sometimes you have those things that need
Mhm.
arbitration, and that's where there's usually a dice system. Like you roll this number, and if you get this or higher, then you did hit the guy with the rock, and if you get this or lower, then you missed.
I think that's a really accurate description, but I always resist it because I don't like the connotation of like make believe. Instead,
Mhm.
I like to go to the actor thing. I'm like, well, okay, has anybody ever wanted to be in acting? And most people are like, well, yeah. You can get a group of people say, sure, yeah, of course. Why? Well, I mean, you got to realize a different character. People are watching. So what? So you got a social reinforcement there, right? You get people you care about or people you don't care about saying, hey, good job in that role.
Mhm.
Then what else you get? Oh, you got to kind of play pretend. You got to like use that empathy as a tool rather than a reactive device, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so proactively, and you get I can't remember the third one I usually bring up. It's been a while since I've had this debate, but the third one is it makes role playing fun. But well, basically just using your mind. Like the combat system is really fun,
Mhm.
usually. And if those three things are in place, I usually have a good role playing session. And I think everyone can get behind that. Like people
Yeah.
who try to act like it's a big mystery, I think like I don't get it, and I'm like, yes, you do. I think you would.
Yeah, well,
But
and that's why the playground thing comes to mind for me because we've all done it before and we all had fun doing it. We just stopped because it became less socially reinforced.
yeah, yeah,
And some of those people didn't stop and they became actors.
yeah.
But so a narrative RPG, as opposed to other games, it's more focused on the narration, the story, than it is on the rule set. So they usually have lighter rule systems and more just kind of freedom. Like in a typical RPG, like I would say, like D&D would be the prototypical RPG, right? That's like the platonic ideal of what an RPG is for most people. Like you think of RPG, you think of Dungeons and Dragons.
I think so. Yeah.
So in D&D, what happens usually is hey, can I reach that switch? Is there what's the door made out of? Is it made out of wood? Like every single detail you want to know, you have to ask the DM, and the DM who controls the world is like, okay, yes, that wood is 3 inches thick. It's like it's like on Community when Abed was DMing, and he's like, okay, well the bridge is made by goblin artisans, and so it's a little bit flimsy, and he's got every single factor of his world already made set in stone, and people just ask him about it because he's
Yeah.
Abed. He's kind of like that's just how he is. So it's a perfect system for him. But a narrative RPG is more of a group storytelling, right? So instead of you asking me if you can open the door, or you asking me if there's, let's say you're in a bar and you're like, hey, is there like a bottle of wine nearby because you want to hit somebody in the head with a bottle of wine to start a brawl fight. Like,
hmm
you just say, like, I reach over and I grab some Corellian ale and I throw it in the guy's face, and then you have the freedom to kind of make up what's in the room with me.
Okay. So more creative license for the actors in the play rather than just the world sculptor kind
Right. It's a lot of in
of the director.
improv. We have a concept called yes and. You ever
hmm
hear of that? Like where
Yeah.
someone's like yes and you add to it instead of saying no or no but.
Yeah.
And narrative RPGs are very much like that, right? Like you come in and you're like, yeah, and it's just really hot that day, and the GM will be like, right, yeah, and in fact, most people are selling water on the side of the street because of how hot it is. Like we just kind of play off each other. It's more of a group narrative. We all contribute to the story.
Hmm. Seems like almost two different like GM types too, or DMs if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. Is they like some if they don't know, because you always get things you don't know. Like I craft my bar, for example, to use your example.
Mm.
You craft your bar in your head. You know what it looks like. You know where your patrons are. You got a quick idea in your head and you move on. And then they say something like, do they have Fey wine on the menu or something like that? And you hadn't thought of that. It's
Mm.
like there's almost a decision-making dichotomy there, where either you say why would it or why would it not. And
Right.
I think it's more fun if you have GMs that are like why. So the why not. Kind of like whenever I say with parenting, I say the same thing: is try to find a way for your kids. Like first of all, well, I won't get into that, but in this particular example, be the why not parent. Like
Right.
like find a way for them to be able to do that, just in parameters that you control. But so sorry, go ahead.
No, no, you're totally right. It's and I think it also has to do with the dynamic between the players and the DM. Like sometimes in D&D, there's this kind of us versus him or her mentality where
hmm
the players feel like the DM's kind of an antagonist.
Right.
plays a role of like the adversary, right? Like, oh, we beat your monster, dude. We beat your dungeon. Like this,
Yeah.
and that's a very kind of old style way of thinking of D&D. Like that's kind of it seems like a lot of the grognards, a lot of second edition, first edition D&D players were very much about like it was bragging rights. I survived the Tomb of Horrors and I totally kicked the Lich's butt and we won and got all the treasure. And if the DM gets you with a trap, he's like, haha, you fool, you didn't check that trap with a 10-foot pole.
Right.
So it's kind of this like kind of antagonistic relationship. But in a narrative game, it's more of a we're all on the same team. We're all just trying to tell an interesting story. So instead of like a DM's thought process in an old D&D game, if they ask like, is there Feywild in the room? They might think like, oh, what's he gonna use the Feywild for? I gotta make sure there's no traps. Like he's gonna do something to trick me and break the game.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of trust, right? But in a narrative game, it's like, is there Feywild in the room? Yeah, sure, why not? Like if that will make the story interesting, you clearly have something in mind. Let's go with it.
Yeah. I actually this reminds me exactly because there's a necessary antagonism that happens if you use that old school system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the DM, is you're trying. So your motivation becomes what in that dynamic?
Like
what,
ideally, it's.
Or I mean, in that
players.
dynamic. In the bad one, or not the bad one. Sorry, the old school one. What is it?
Like in the old school one, like a good DM in that mentality wants to challenge the players. He wants them to have fun by overcoming challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then a bad DM just wants to win, right? Which is kind of cheap because you can when you're the DM. You can just turn everything into lava. Now they're all dead.
This is what's really important about something we call positive behavior support, which is like an evidence-based way to raise your children.
Mm-hmm.
And we teach it in this thing called this evidence-based way to do it, which is a parent management training. Parent management training. Because people say, my kid's broke, we say, let's fix you. Not the kid, right? People don't like that, but we find a way to sell it. We usually do. But, one of the things that we teach, I just gave it I just trained some people 2 weeks ago, or a week ago, about this very thing. And I said, what happens whenever you, when there becomes an antagonistic relationship between you and the person across from you because they're making it known that they're your superior, right? Mm-hmm. Which, even if they are, like, you don't need to make that known all the time. Like, the president doesn't just walk in sometimes and go, I'm the president, just letting everyone know, just remind you guys, I am totally your superior. Instead, like, some jerk journalist says something horrible to him, to whichever president, and he reacts like she's a superior or he's a superior, or I'm sorry, a peer, and it says, yeah, that's a really good question, blah, 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 blah. He could just be like, dude, I'm the president, I know what's going on, shut up,
Right.
Like, I know what I'm doing, there's secret stuff I can't tell you about. But he doesn't, he treats her like a peer and says, oh, okay, yeah. So, like, when someone puts a limit on someone, like, for example, like, if what it becomes with is, like, imagine you want to jump on the trampoline outside, and your parents said, no, don't go outside. You've got to finish blah, blah, blah first. And then they just sit there and watch you the whole time. A lot of times what happens is if an opportunity arises, the kid's more likely to do it than if you had, if you hadn't have absolutely put that, like, that you can't do this thing. All I'm saying is it becomes an antagonistic relationship. This is getting a little abstract. I'm trying to talk about this, like, briefly, but I'm just realizing now that's a lot more complex. But essentially it's positive behavior support is based on instead of like getting those or saying those restrictions can't be done, you find a way to say yes. So like the kid says, can I go jump on the trampoline? You say absolutely after you eat dinner or whatever, right? So that way the restriction is, it's not that you are this person who is inhibiting them from their goals. It's just that's life, because that's a parent's job to teach them what life's like,
Right.
Anyway, and so kids act better because they're less likely to. People are more likely to do bad things if they're restricted from doing it and monitored all the time, and then they have a slip in monitoring because you see it as an opportunity. It operates on the scarcity resource aspect of us, and that kind of thing. Like it's like, oh man, I may not. I don't know if I ever want to do this, like drugs or something. It's like parents who are over parenting and then their kid gets out and they get crazy for a while.
Right. Well,
it's that kind of thing.
It kind of ties into the whole like antagonistic relationship. Like if you're setting yourself up as a parent to be the antagonist, then it's easier to justify defying you because you're the enemy, right? So like you can justify all kinds of things you wouldn't normally do if it's to an enemy, right? Like you wouldn't steal from a friend, but that guy's my enemy. You wouldn't drop a nuclear bomb on like Kansas, but Tokyo is our enemy, or Okinawa is our enemy, like Japan's our enemy. Let's bomb them.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that whole antagonism. But even if not like a restriction of any kind, yeah, you kind of see it as like a whenever the opportunity comes up, you're more likely to do it. It's kind of like when people say this, like they're in Vegas or something. They say, listen, this is the only chance we'll get to ever go to slots machines. Let's do it. And even someone who's less likely to do it normally, if they lived in Vegas, then they'll be like, okay, and they'll do it because of that. And that's what you're kind of instilling in your kid if you're overparenting. Same thing here with like DMing. What you're doing is you're forcing the PC, or the player character, to try to maximize his character at every opportunity he gets, even if it's like harmful to the party, right? Like make your character a super powerful guy that totally makes everyone else feel like crap whenever the combat happens. You're more likely to do that if you're having this antagonistic relationship because heck, if you can get away with it, then that's sort of the justification system right there. Whereas this narrative RPG style, it's not the case because the onus is then on everybody to make a good story rather than maximize your character's power.
Yeah, the win condition changes from like my character becoming really great to being an interesting story.
Yeah, yeah.
And it takes some adjusting, especially for our group, because we're not used to that. So I think in our first session, we were mostly trying to win still. Like I'd be like, okay, what do you do next? And everybody looks at their character sheet, and they're looking for what their best skill is, right? And they're like, okay, who's got the highest diplomacy or whatever? And then they're like looking down. They're like, okay, well, my persuasion's this. And, it became a very kind of meta conversation instead of an in-character thing.
Yeah.
Whereas in the last game we did, you guys never had that conversation. You just were like, this would be cool if I was over here and I talked to this guy. And like, yeah, and I'm going to stand by the door and do this. And we were just kind of like making a cool scene in our heads.
Yeah, yeah. That was very apparent. It was awesome.
So,
yeah, I think it's a better, or at least a more fun playthrough. I don't know if it's better, but it's more fun, I think, when you're that way. Plus, you don't feel so, because it makes salient the fact that you guys all rely on each other to make a good story. It increases cooperation. That, with obviously interacting with the fact that you talk OOC less. But yeah, I think it works pretty well. It was fun, man. It's really fun.
Yeah, so I wanted to focus in on this narrative systems, and especially Edge of the Empire, because that's the one we've played most recently. But this isn't unique to Edge of the Empire. A lot of games do this. Something called character motivations. So you'll notice when we were building our characters, we spent almost as much time talking about like what our motivations were as characters as we did what our skills and stats were. Like the chapter devotes a lot of time to it. They've got this thing called like background and obligation and motivations. Like what motivates your character? Does he hate slavery? Is he trying to gain power? Is he like interested in helping other people? And you can use that as kind of a shorthand to know how your character will react. Because again, in role-playing games, they might react differently than you, right? Like you might be playing somebody with completely different values than your own. And so not only that, but it's good shorthand for the dungeon master or GM or whoever to look at his characters and say, I want them to go on this adventure. How will I get them interested in it, right? Like with Tim, I got you guys interested with a droid who was dying, and Tim was a free droid, so he had some empathy for that.
Yeah, right.
So it's just interesting to see how motivation is such an important thing for narrative, whereas some other games, like maybe 4th edition, we rarely talked about our motivations, right? It was more like we were more interested in what they could do in a fight.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it primes you too, because I mean, honestly, I had to kind of sit with it for a while. It forced me to kind of, and I'm one of these people who, like you're this way too. We kind of like take our characters and we really flesh them out in our heads, even though it's not necessary. You think about like where they came from, what they like, do they have parents? Usually not, because it's easier or whatever, and that kind of thing. But this one, even still, like it helped question like what's his motivation and what's something that is out to get him, something that like would make a cool end scene, or wrap up the trilogy when he does this, gets rid of this thing.
Right. Yeah. What are his motivations? What are his ideologies? Right. Like in D&D, we call it lawful good, chaotic evil. In Star Wars, we call it obligation and motivation and ambitions. But basically, we're talking about ideologies. We're talking about their worldviews and like how they see the world, what they want from the world, what they think they can get from the world. And we use those, like we say, to motivate the character. Like this is how he's going to react because this is his ideology, this is his worldview. And that's how writers write characters too, right? In order to keep them internally consistent in a novel, you have to kind of know what they value and how they'll react in different situations. And this is why it's so counterintuitive, because that's not how people are in real life.
Yeah. Wait, which one?
like in a character, like a literary character or a character in a game, you start off with a motivation or an ideology, and then you say, okay, he's going to react this way because
Oh,
this is
right.
how he reacts. Like
Right.
he helps oh, there's a homeless person. My character always helps homeless people, so he's going to help that homeless person. And
Right.
you, when you're writing it, let's say you're writing a novel, you have the same thing, right? Like you're George R. R. Martin. You're like the imp is going to react this way because he values these things.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's funny because if you ask a room full of psychologists, and we've done this a lot in our department at least, and like at conferences, they say, "What's the biggest predictor of future behavior?" And it's like being anywhere, like being at Walmart whenever they do their Walmart squiggly dance. I don't know if you guys know that, but the Walmart home office, they do a dance every single morning, and it's absurd. But every single morning, like the point is, everybody does it, and if you don't, it's like what? So same thing here. Like, what do you think they say? What's the biggest predictor of future behavior? Do you know?
Uh, Past behavior.
There you go. Okay, yeah, good. Just I'm already rubbing off on you. Good. It's true. Like it's we do a lot of statistical analyses, and what you do is you plug in a lot of variables, and like the variables like get weighted a certain amount, like in different models, and then you find the model that fits the best, and then you look at the variables, like the weight on that variable. So like something with like 0.8 or 0.23 are different. 0.8 means it's more influential on the outcome. Something like 0.23 is much less. I mean that seems pretty intuitive. I don't think I need to go into that, but.
Put me on the spot there. I'm glad I passed.
You got it, yeah. So like you said, it doesn't matter your attitudes, your beliefs, or what you self-identify as your motivations. It does matter. Like it obviously jumps into the model, and it has some weight. But the largest weight by far, and every psychologist knows it. If there's one law of human nature, it's this: past behavior is the greatest predictor of future behavior.
Right, and that even works out. Like, let's say you design a character. Like this kind of happened in our game, right? We had your character Rafe, who was a trooper. He's a former Imperial guy. Now he's just a guy with a gun, big gun. And we kind of designed him the way you picked his skills. You kind of make him kind of an abrasive bully. You had a lot of coercion. Most of your skills were gun related or just pushing people around, like physicality.
Yeah.
But that's very different from you as a person. Like you're more of a charismatic kind of person. Like you're less of a bully and more of a like try and talk people into things. That's kind of why you win the psychology probably is because you're good at like using your words,
Right.
using mouth speaking.
Yeah,
as they say.
mouth talks.
Mouth
Neuro
talks.
speaking. It's called, David. Neuro speaking.
Wait. Go ahead.
I have to say this because anyone who hasn't listened to the intro section, I'm kidding. It's not called neuro speaking. I went off on a rant about people say neuro or we do it to a psychologist, psycho something like psychotherapy, psycho-assessment. It's just assessment, guys. Like you just say psycho to legitimize it. And so when the layperson says neuro something, like someone said neurotypical on a Facebook debate, and I was like, what is that neurotypical? No, like typical, of normal people. I'm like, that's just called typical. Like if you're saying an aspect of them, that's fine. But anyway, whatever. Sorry.
I was texting Whitney the other night, and she was doing these kind of short responses, and then she said, "Sorry, I'm not making good talkies." And I was like, "Talkies?" And then she's like, "Replies," but it like auto-corrected to talkies. So it was really like, "You don't make good talkies." So it reminded me of that.
Good.
But when you ended up playing him in the game, you ended up playing Rafe. You ended up kind of drifting away from that and trying to do more like, hey man, listen up, this is how it's going to be, like persuasion and negotiation.
Yeah.
So what do you think is going on there? Because we just got done saying that role-playing games, you want to try and be somebody different than who you are, but is that possible, or is it going to kind of drift back towards who you are as a person?
I'll tell you in one answer: Ninja Turtles. That's
yes.
why.
Okay.
Essentially, like,
elaborate.
What do I mean? Let's see if you can figure it out.
Okay, so we have Ninja Turtles. Are you talking about group dynamics?
Yeah, remember we talked about this like 1 or 2 episodes ago?
Mm-hmm.
And you had a lot of insight on like Ninja Turtles and like psychology.
Right. So basically, as the need arises, different group dynamics come into play, right? So you may have wanted to play a abrasive bully, but we needed a face man, so you kind of drift into that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think it is an interaction effect of what you said earlier. But you said, can we even play someone different? Because I think there's an interaction with the fact that not only that, like the group clearly needed a face man. Like there was no doubt we were not, possibly doing that, and something needed a wiggle. And then, but why me? Why me?
Why not someone else like Tim or John?
Yeah. Well, I think John tried, but the problem is like, I have a specific set of skills, and I feel comfortable in that role. So yeah, I think I do. Out of the 4 Ninja Turtles, I did gravitate towards that, whatever he is, Leonardo maybe.
Yeah.
Leonardo, that's right. So I did gravitate towards that because I was like, you know what, guys, I really have this skill set in real life, so it makes sense. I'm not saying I'm the greatest at it, but I do spend a lot of time talking to people, so I was like, let me grab this one. But
Yeah.
and it made sense though, because Rafe, my character in Star Wars: The Old Republic, is kind of a talky. I play him.
Commander, right? Like he's a leader of men.
Yeah, and you can be a jerk on there, and just overrule people. You can say no, not happening, or say things like because I commanded it. But instead, I usually talk with my troop, my troops to try to get them to understand why I'm doing it.
Right. And so it kind of fits into this idea, like even in a game, like where you start off with motivation and your actions go from your motivations and your ideologies and your personality that you've worked out. Because in a narrative sense, like that's how you write characters. But even then, it wasn't ideology or personality or motivation that was motivating your character so much as what you'd done in the past and what had worked for you.
Yeah, yeah. So you're saying like a learning history kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Past behavior, future behavior, right?
Exactly.
Like
you can't escape psychology.
I know, right? Like people get these ideas. The funny thing about motivations is it's this weird abstraction. So like, let's say you've got a bunch of concrete variables like behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can all see it. It's objective. You say when we fill out psych reports, for example, like I work at a facility for one of my jobs. I have like 4, but one of them is to work at a facility for people with intellectual disabilities, and it's really good for behaviorism because you never go into the cognitive bit because a lot of them aren't using the cognitive bit, at least the same way that we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we can do behavioral principles and show that they work, and the person doesn't get caught up of like, yeah, but the cognitions all the time, like address my cognition zone. It's like it's unimportant because the concrete variables like behavior, past behavior, future behavior, and then we make this extraction between the two. I'm holding my hands out, no one can see this, but you got the past behavior on the left, you got the future behavior on the right, and you've got an arrow that goes this to this, right? Past behavior, arrow, future behavior. People do this little like rainbow over the top and go, yeah, but motivations, right? And I'm like, well, yeah, but still, it's all explained by, or the majority of it is explained just by past behavior, your learning history. And they say, yeah, but what about thoughts? They make another rainbow. And I say, yeah, still small effect there. And it's irrelevant. Like, why would you put your time into that, right? This something that only explains like maybe 13% of the variance, whenever past behavior is like 80%.
Right.
Why even talk to the person about that? You can. It makes them feel comfortable. And what we found in therapy is this is pretty cool. There's something called face validity, and what that means in psychology, I think in other sciences too, but it's like if a layperson reads it, or if you tell a layperson to do it, do they see it as valid, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like whenever I talk to a client and I say something like, for depression, for example, one of the first line treatments is behavioral activation, and which just means like get up and do things that are not just anything, but things that are meaningful, or some people say meaningful, but values-based is another way to put it. It's like, what do you want out of life? Do something towards that. But I can't. It's depression. Yeah, it's cyclical. I get it. But we're intervening here. But the face validity goes up whenever we address their cognitions. It's kind of funny that way. Like it doesn't actually. It's not a valid. A lot of times, it's not a valid way to get them better. But they're more likely to have treatment adherence, which means they're more likely to stay in therapy and get better.
Right, because they value, like they think that the advice is better, so it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy because then they stick to it.
Yeah, and then they come up with all these. A lot of therapy though gets sidetracked because they do the behavior and they're getting better, but then they start attributing it to other things. Their cognitions get in the way. And I say things like, oh well, let's readjust fire there, but it's not necessary that I do, except that I like to make sure the person actually knows what's going on. It's kind of a weird thing with me. I'm a bad like therapist this way because there are good therapists who they'll say I'll do whatever it takes to make it work, and I agree. But then they're like, so explain to me how the psycho ed part is doing that, is using the client's money because they're paying money the most efficiently. And I'm like, it's not, but I'd want to know. I'd want to know how it's working. And so I always like end up talking about like neural substrates and things like that to explain how it works, because I'm like, well, okay, let me put it this way. Here's what you're getting, and I start talking about it in the brain, and so that they understand it. But
some people don't want to take the pill that takes them back out of the matrix, Jeremiah. Some people like living in the matrix.
Yeah, they want to think that like what I think is the most important influence, or what I think I would do in the future is the most important variable, but it's not. It's how did you do it before,
right?
So, it's really kind of, I don't know, for me this was a huge deal. I resented it, I rejected it for a while, I tried to find ways around it, I got really upset. But that's because what? My ideology was that my thoughts drive my behavior. And ideologies are pretty sticky, aren't they?
It's a sticky wicket, as one might say.
Who's that one that might say that? I've never met someone like
He's
that.
like a retired British Army officer. It's a sticky wicket. Yes, yes.
And he's playing cricket.
Yeah, I'm playing cricket with my sticky wicket.
Drinking tea.
Yeah. So yeah, interesting because we are seeing a lot of the same confusion happening in the news. We already talked about Glenn Beck deciding that, and the media in general deciding that every violent shooting spree comes from a video game,
Mm-hmm.
which again is a question of misattributing what motivates people.
Yeah. Because the person themselves did, right? Sometimes they explicitly say, "I'm doing this because of Doom," and they
Right.
shoot. Right.
Right. They'll be like, "This one is for all the people who made fun of me because I play video games. Now I'm the video game master."
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone.
And if there's one thing I hope that most people who listen to this, please, I hope they take away, is that we don't know why we do things. Stop paying attention to people's self-reports. Like, it's helpful, but it's not the largest predictor. Like,
Right.
we do clinical interviews, obviously, as therapists. Like, that's where you sit down with them for like an hour when you first meet, and you just say, "Tell me everything that's going on. Let me get your conceptualization of it." But the most important bit out of that is not that, "Oh, well, there you go. They've already got themselves self-diagnosed." No, that would be stupid. Their best part is, or the most important part is, how do they conceptualize it, and where can I work here?
Right.
Like, if they say things like, "Some
We're
people,"
really bad at knowing why we do things, and so asking them why they do things is not going to be the end-all diagnosis.
exactly. And this is happening on freaking Facebook, man. Like, people are like, he explicitly said he did it."
Yeah, let's get into that. So, for people who haven't been following the news, Jeremiah, why don't you bring us up to speed on what was going on?
Okay. Did I talk about this at all last
No,
podcast?
I think you brought it up in a rant, but
Okay. Well, the Elliot Rogers, rather. He was a young man who was he was active on these pickup artist sites. For people who aren't familiar with that, I guess there's these.
it's like a super skeezy like way to get women where you kind of they have these pseudo psychological like things like negging where you tell girls like, "Oh, hey girl, you look not as fat as normal today," and you're trying to like lower their self-esteem so they'll date someone below them.
Mm-hmm.
And just a lot of stuff like that where you just be a kind of a douche and then
Yeah, I mean, it's operating on principles
Yeah.
that I could use out in the public. It's psychological, like, we know this is how this works, but I don't, because I'm not using the dark side. Like, I don't, I don't want to do that. Like, yes, I can raise the probability that some female, should I not be married, would want to engage me by doing certain things, but I'm going to choose the ones where she's aware of them, as much as possible.
And a lot of it's a numbers game too, right? They're like, yeah, if you talk to like 300 beautiful women and you get one girl to sleep with you, then that's a win. So it basically reduces women to just
win conditions, right?
win conditions to be tricked. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, it's not that you want a relationship with them. You want to have a one-night stand, usually.
Right. They're notches on a bedpost, basically.
Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of you are picking this up, but it's pretty skeezy. And this guy was into it. But here's the question: why?
He was not having a lot of success with women using his normal charm.
Yeah, like, maybe we don't
Or
know
his
the direction
great
of that. But you'll notice that people already came up with a narrative to explain why. But I'm like, do we know that? Do we know that like he
Oh
was...
yeah, the narrative is he's a misogynist who hates women.
Right, and clearly he was, obviously. Like, I'm not going to debate that. But how did that come about? Like, because there are two possibilities that could have borne that out. Not that these are that important, but I just want to challenge people. Is one, either he tried to be a nice guy a bunch, and he's I'm not going to say mentally ill. That's a legal construct. It doesn't mean anything to psychologists.
Mm-hmm.
Mentally ill just is something a bunch of lawyers, people with law degrees, sat around with zero knowledge of psychology, said, "We're just going to call it this," and they drew a fence around a certain area and said, "That's what we're going to call mentally ill." It's not informed at all by psychology. It is informed, sorry, but it isn't our construct, and they keep trying to make us work with it. They're like, "Is he mentally ill?" And I'm like, I don't know what that means. Are you saying, does he have a mental disorder, like a psychological disorder? Yes, I can speak on that, but I don't want to play with your tools. They're crappy. But essentially, this guy, was he just creepy and weird, and then over time he's like, "Oh, I need to do whatever it takes because, like, I've got a lot of money, I'm a pretty good-looking dude, and I still can't get girls, and there's a lot of social pressure for males to have girls by this time, like to not be a virgin, quote unquote," was something he said, and to have like a beautiful girlfriend. Like, it's considered getting a mate having money and or power is one of the win conditions of life, right?
Hmm.
When people get married, they say, "Well, it's a monumental thing. Well done."
It's a milestone, yeah.
Right. So he was obviously falling short on the development curve here, and I don't know which one came first. It's irrelevant, but I just want to challenge people. No one knows at the moment that I know of. Maybe they do, but it's irrelevant. Which one came first? I mean, maybe he was a skis ball and he was attracted to pickup artists, or maybe he tried legitimately and he sucked, and then he picked up, heard someone who who said pickup artists worked, and he thought, fine, whatever it takes to get me jump started.
Right.
Like, we don't know. I mean, the guy's obviously the end condition, like where he ended up. Yeah, this guy's a skis bag. I mean, I wouldn't let him anywhere near any woman I know.
Or any male I know. I wouldn't want anyone around him. He's not a safe person.
Right, right. And he's, like obviously like has toxic ways of thinking. And people don't get that. They think if I have a different opinion, all of a sudden I'm a misogynist too. And I'm like, no, I just see people as people. Like, I understand people. That's my degree, is to understand people. And so I'm understanding this man, a little differently, or young man, than someone else. And I would hope so, because if I had the same, that's popular opinion, like, well, I don't know, popular opinion's right a lot too. But then what's the point of having a degree? But anyway, the deal here is that, and people have these ideologies, and our ideologies give us a framework to interpret incoming stimuli, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, isn't that kind of the point of a framework?
Yeah, it's like why we develop them, so we can understand things.
Yeah, yeah. So we don't have to think of every possible scenario of every incoming concept, right? Like some people, and some people can verbalize these outright. They can say, "I think people are generally good people." Right? They can say that. I think people are generally good people, and I operate on that basis. Whether they're right or wrong, that's just how they're going to behave to new people. Right?
Right.
Like, and so what that is it's a framework so that whenever new stimuli comes in, like, hey, I meet a new person, it allows you to file it away in a drawer. The right one, I don't know, but it lets you file it away and you're done with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the problem is we're not always right?
Yes.
And we don't like that. We don't like that we're not always right about those.
Right.
So people got really pissed whenever I challenged them on that, even though I was like, guys, you realize that mass murder suicide is kind of my thing. And when I say kind of my thing, I mean my research specialty. And when I say research specialty, I mean I'm one of only few of the people who are actually considered, like an expert on this. Like, not many people have, like, even in my own department, all the other clinical licensed psychologists have no idea when it comes to this. They ask me. This isn't common knowledge, guys. Like, I don't know. Your opinion isn't, I don't know. It's not peer reviewed.
Well, what happens is it's kind of a hot button issue because people there's these certain topics in our culture that are very like hot button. People get really passionate about. Like, one of them is gun rights, right? So like usually when there's a mass shooting, you'll see a lot of NRA ads about like the Second Amendment. And then there's another one is racism. Like, even during like, people will always see whatever their hot button issue is. They try and interpret every event through that lens. So like, I just saw on Facebook the other day, someone was like, black guy shoots folks equals thug, brown guy shoots folks equals terrorist, white guy guns down women equals nice kid with mental health issues. Right? So they're taking that and they're looking at it through this lens of race. And then one of the really big hot button issues on the internet is, of course, feminism, right?
Yeah.
And so what happened with this shooting, because he killed a lot of sorority girls, in addition to a lot of men, but he killed a lot of sorority girls, and he made a manifesto stating his intentions were to punish women and become a god among men and some other things. But he had a lot of misogyny in his manifesto, said that was one of his motivations, and so people kind of latched onto that. But what's the problem with using his manifesto as his motivation?
Well, because if you're a specialist in mass murder suicides, like myself, you've heard these. Like, everybody says a reason why they do things, and sometimes they're like, what was one of them was playing cards or something. I'm trying to remember, but there's been, I think, 36 to date. Most people don't know that because we used to not cover these. But mass murder suicide. So I've been really dug into a bunch of these. But people say just insane things. Some people say it's because, just all kinds of things. But if that isn't important. What's important is, what does his behavior tell us, right? He said, I'm going to punish all these people, and then he killed his nerdy roommates for having an annoying voice, quote unquote. Like, this man is a violent man who, the catalyst model essentially is what we're going through here. Friend of the show,
Right.
Chris Ferguson, he's the author of that thing.
He mentioned the catalyst model when he was on our show for his interview,
Mhm.
but just a brief rundown of it was the catalyst model.
Well, essentially, it's this. It's a multidisciplinary model, so it takes into account three fields that are currently looking at this, or four fields, sorry: psychology, neuroscience, biology, and criminal justice. All those people are very interested in how to do this. So criminal justice has theirs, and that informs legal situations a lot. A lot of lawyers and things know about the criminal justice literature.
Mhm.
A lot of them don't know about the biology or the neuroscience, and a lot of them don't know about the psychology. So what Chris did was he publishes like in all those fields, man. You can go look him up like in looking at him publishing in different fields. It's incredible. He's super smart and well informed in all those fields. So he said, we all talk about these things different ways, but why don't we just put all that together? So he used the catalyst model. So you've got 50% of violence is scripted by genetics, right? Is explained, the variance can be explained by genetics. So okay, so sounds like there's a genetic aspect of violence, which I don't know if that makes sense to some people. It makes sense to me from what I know. But then 50
So
to
by
80%.
genetics, you mean like some people's they just don't have the same like mechanisms in their brain that like stop violent behavior, or they have different mechanisms that encourage violent behavior?
Right. Well, we're not sure because there's going to be two findings, and obviously these both can't be true. So what it is it's just like if I take a variable. Oh, man, should I get it? Yeah. Okay. So like I should put it this way. I'm not very skilled at like knowing where the scale is. You need to scale down ideas.
Mhm.
So I'm going to try to do that here, and hopefully I do it well. But basically, so you've got like when I was talking about models before, right?
Mhm.
You get a model that says, let's say I plug in like, why is my kid bad, right? And then what do you think are some good variables to plug in there to look at?
Well, the two main ones, nature and nurture.
Okay, so nature,
So
nurture, all right.
yeah, their
And then,
environment, their genetics.
all right. And so if I was to be asked that question, I would say, well, okay, let's look at a couple things. One, what kind of behaviors are you doing? Because there's social modeling. That's the one way a child might learn. So I would record that, measure it, and plug it into my algorithm.
Mhm.
And then another thing is I would say, what else? What else is relevant here? Like, well, how is his social functioning? Okay, so plug that in there. And then, or how is his, and finally, like, let's see, yeah, is there any genetic predeterminant for if he's being like violent? I would put that in there, and then I measure that. So then I get a weight, right, a percentage, like assigned to that variable, like let's say genetics. Well, or if I put in a different measurements, then I would get a different percentage. Okay, so like if I said, all right, so I asked another psychologist this, or not another, I'm not a psychologist, sorry, another or actual psychologist this, and he was measuring it. He might say, what's important? What's his nutrition like?
Right.
What's his this like, and what's his yeah, whatever. And so what that does is you're going to get two different weights. Well, that's kind of what the two fields did. So the biological fields found that 50% is due to just general violence is due to generally to genetics. Well, the neuroscience field found there's a part of the brain called the impulse control device, we call it. Device, that's a funny way to say it, but the portion of the brain that inhibits our natural actions, right? Like let's say someone on the internet calls me stupid. I want to say something like, oh, shut up, you're stupid, back, right? Tell them
Right.
to stop saying it, and then make them feel the way I feel. But I have an impulse control portion of my brain that I have developed over, that I've constantly like developed over my career here, to not do that and to inhibit that. Well, there's actually abnormalities you can have in your brain, and 50 to 80% of those of violence from the neuroscience field, they say 50 to 80% comes from that abnormalities in that impulse control device. So we all have these impulses, and this matches up to what people say, because people say like, I wanted to kill people, but I don't because I don't read, MRA stuff, men's rights activists. I don't read misogynistic literature, so I don't. I've gotten mad at women before, but I don't hit them, and I'm like, that's because your impulse control device. I know your self-report matches up with science or with my model. I understand that. Please, people completely misunderstand that, like, I already know what you're telling me, and I know why you're telling it to me. Like, I get that. Like, and so most of my time is spent saying that. I'm like, right, and why? But people don't. If you just tell them a conclusion, you get the reactance effect, right?
Right.
So if I say, I know that's why you did that, and this is why, the impulse control device, the reactance effect is to say, or even just to walk away feeling shamed and then still not talk and still not believe me.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to walk them to it so that they remember one of the biggest predictors of someone's attitude change is how their valence, how they feel about you afterwards, or how they feel afterwards. So
Right.
so I have to do it nicely. So I have to be like, oh, okay, so why do you think that is? Oh, okay, and I slowly like sculpt their opinion down to my conclusion, and I always win because I'm not wrong. Like I say win, but I always successfully change their mind to what science says, which whether science is right or wrong, I'm not sure, but it has a better idea than the layperson does.
Right.
Yeah, so
So the catalyst model says 50% of it is genetic.
yeah, catalyst model takes that into account by saying, there's this biological factor. Then you have these things like early things like familial violence. So that means violence inside the family. Acts on that, and it with those two things combined, I am Captain Planet. No, with those two things combined, then you've got these behavioral trajectory, is what we call it. Man, is this getting too nerdy? Maybe going too far into this. See, I'm no good at scaling these things down. I get excited about it. There's a possibility of all.
Pretend you're not talking to Chris Ferguson. Pretend you're writing a Time magazine article.
Oh yeah, well, okay. So you've got all these possibilities based on your genetic predispositions, right, and your early familial environment. So, damn it, that's too much too. But
you have a learning history. You have things that you've been exposed to, and you've got things that are innate inside of your body.
Right,
and what does that add up to percentage-wise, for as far as like knowing if you're going to be violent or not?
Well, you have impulses to do different things. I'm sure we've all done this, right? Like we sit down and we say, "Oh man, I want to tell that guy what's up." No, but I also want to like make my wife feel better. Like if the server comes up and he's rude to my wife, I say I want to reach out to her. I want to address him. Like if you could pause it in time, like Zach Morris did, I want to talk to him. I want to do this. I want to ignore it so it goes away. I want to do a lot of things, right? That's called the behavioral trajectories, right? Which one am I going to do? Well, your impulse control device steps in and it limits those options. It says, well, I want to punch him, but I won't, so it takes that one out. Then it says, like, I want to look down and just ignore the whole thing because it made me feel better about myself and I wouldn't have to deal with it, but I don't because I'm controlling that impulse. But two of them that make it out of there, that my impulse control doesn't really need that, or impulse control lets it pass, is either address his rude behavior or comfort my wife. Right, and which one do I do first? So that impulse control device, now we're past that in the model. So we've got these two behaviors left, right? Which one am I going to do? Well, that's when you kind of decide on which one. But the biology acts at each one of those points. And you get something called a catalyst, right? So with violence in particular, it's kind of put it this way, the spark that sets off the powder keg. So genetics is the powder keg. Your impulse control is the wick, right? And this is a great way to say it, actually. I should have said this. And so, yeah, edit all that out. The powder keg is your genetics. The wick, so how much you can take, is your impulse control device. And the spark is the catalyst.
Okay.
I think that's a good way to say it. I'll ask Chris to make sure, but yeah. So this spark just happened to be, it's incidental, right? Like anything could set it off. So it's not a great analogy because the spark can take all different forms.
Right. It could be a cigarette butt. It could be just some friction. It could be the heat of the sun. Like there's a lot of different things that can cause a spark.
Right. But that's a powder keg, man. It was going to blow. Like it's just a matter of time or something like that. That lines up at least with the other sciences. And where psychology comes in is this impulse control device, how to make that better, how to inhibit someone's violent tendencies, right? And then finally the behavioral trajectory portion of it, like how to help them develop, more impulse control device really, but and to limit catalysts like this.
And so this common misconception we have as a public is that ideologies influence behavior more than anything else, right? Like if you're a white supremacist, you're going to be more likely to punch a black person. Or if you are a neo-Nazi, you're going to be more likely to hate Jews. Or if you are, let's say you believe in humanitarianism, you're more likely to go build wells in Africa. Like that's kind of the common conception of how ideology works.
Right. So how did that person get that ideology? But no one knows, do they?
Right. Yeah, that's where you
exactly
silence.
But we do. Psychologists do. We know how the person gets it. It's not that they, we're just like a cookie cutter person coming through a standard issue brain, right? And all of a sudden they were exposed to
neo-Nazism.
Right, to humanitarian efforts, or neo-Nazism, and then all of a sudden, bam, there's that now. No, I mean they were someone who had violent tendencies, and guess what? Remember, our behaviors come first. Our motivation or our self-justification comes afterwards. So I feel violent. Well, I'm also identify as maybe I don't know how you become a Nazi like out of this because there's not really
misogynist because that's more relevant.
Well, yeah, or a Nazi is an extremist view by nature, so you have to have some segue into that. Lots of movements though have extremists and moderates. So like men's right activists have moderates, and then they have extremists that want to beat women. Feminists have moderates, and they have women that abort all their male children. There's a girl's page on Tumblr that encourages people to do this because she calls it testosterone poisoning, which is I think is a really mean way to say guys are
Yeah, like the Y chromosome is a defective X chromosome, and so men are just like genetic defects.
Yeah, there's absolutely no medical research to say that's the case. But yeah, that's her. She's an extremist feminist. Well, the point is, we look across the aisle at the other guys. We only focus on the extremists, and we only look at the centroid or the modal men's right activists or the modal feminist if they're looking at the men's right activists and say like, well, on average, feminists are good people, and then the men's right folks are saying, well, on average, men's right folks are good. But yeah, we've got our extremists. Anyway, the whole point is when you get into one of those movements because it matches up with your values, right? Like feminism, you get in because you're like, I want people to be equal, especially women who are unempowered. And then you gravitate towards the extremist ones if you're a violent person. If you're a powder keg, you're going to find your way to a spark. That's what you're trying to do.
Right. So if your value was feminism and you were a violent, let's say you were a woman with a genetic predisposition towards violence and a learning history of violence, and you joined a feminism movement, you probably wouldn't stay a moderate feminist for long. Like it wouldn't be long before you were doing violence towards men in accordance with your values.
Yes. Yeah, see, it's not that the extremist position convinced you, it's that you used it afterwards. So a priori, before the fact, you would have been violent anyhow, but this gives you a place where you're socially reinforced for those thoughts, the thoughts of the actions you would have taken anyway.
So it kind of channels the violence in a certain direction.
Yeah, I mean it's a catalyst, so yeah, it influences the outlook or how it plays out. But this person would have, if he would have went on to Elliot Rogers, if he would have went on to be like a postal worker, and someone continuously left their post box open or something, he would have murdered them. Like it's not a rational movement from your point. Just like his roommates, he killed more men than he did women, and he killed his roommates because they were quote unquote annoying. He was going to be violent to people. This was just one part of his life. He, a value of having a life mate, and that ended up being turning real perverted into like a pickup artist crap, and and men's right activism, which I think we don't even have that established link, but the extremist men or the men's right activists, he moved towards that and gravitated towards the extremist portion, and then he killed a bunch of people. There are feminists who kill people too, and we don't blame that. We just say, well, feminism is a good movement. It's just that she's an extremist.
Same thing. Right. It's the same thing when there's a Muslim attack, like a terrorist attack. We don't say, like most people, the narrative will be like, oh well, it's not that Muslim is a bad religion. There's just extremist Muslims and there's moderate Muslims.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Except except that still begs the question of like, do people do things based on their ideologies? No, people do things and then justify them with ideologies. Right. Ideology, all it is it's a movement, right? Like men's right movement or the feminism movement. Those are two who are really warring over this right now. And I'm right in the middle, and I'm like, guys, listen, I get it. Guys have good points. Our lives are less valued, right? Like if a mugger jumps out, this is the example you used. If a mugger jumps out of the bushes, this is really simplistic, I understand, but it's a thought experiment. If a mugger jumps out of the bushes and puts up a gun to me, and I jump behind Amy, my wife, and I push her in front, what does that look like? Like how much will that be socially reinforced?
Even if you don't push her in front, you just jump behind her. It's going to be very, very shamed if you survive.
Yeah. So, and what about if we switch the roles? What if Amy did that to me?
That would be like, oh man, you must have been so scared. Jeremiah, good job protecting her.
Yeah, and I guarantee that's exactly what would happen. She would jump behind me. Yeah, I'm a larger male, and males are on average larger, but we can't digress into that, like justifying the action. We have to look at, that's not really fair to males as a gender. And so, yes, I get that. I also get the fact that, women are unempowered in a lot of positions. They're taken advantage of. A lot of times they can't even jog at night without having to worry about getting raped. That's something I do. I jog at night, and I love it.
Right. And my wife, they're discouraged from being assertive in their opinions usually. Like if a male throws his opinion out there, like, this is the way it is. It's like, oh man, that guy, he's a very well-spoken male. But if like a woman does it, it's like, what a bitch.
Yeah, and if a male is cold, they're considered an alpha male, dominant. They're like, oh man, that guy's he's hardcore. Yeah. But if a girl does it, she's a quote unquote ice queen or a bitch. And
so there's a lot of double standards on both ends.
Yeah. But so what happens is, a lot of people can identify with those and say like, yeah, I get that. I guess I'm a blank, feminist, or I guess I'm a men's right activist. And I've always considered myself both. I've always said I'm both. I love that. I talk on both camps. I really do. I talk with both groups, and we both high five.
You're an egalitarian, which is a rare breed because most people just like to focus on where they're having trouble.
Right, and if you ask me, main effect, like main effect in statistics, just means like if you take out all the interactions and you just say as a gender, which one's better off? I like being a dude. That's my opinion though. I don't know comprehensive data sets on this. I don't, but I
Mhm.
feel like it's probably better to be a guy right now. So I understand women saying that they're feeling like they're lagging behind a little bit, but I think
Mhm.
it's changing rapidly, which is good, but hopefully it doesn't teeter-totter too much because we're getting screwed like in the courts right now and stuff.
Pendulum effect, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we get a lot less empathy, things like that, and I, I guess I won't get into that. The point is that's the catalyst model, and this is how people come about these horrible things. Yeah, and also video games, guys, video games.
Right, well, exactly. So the Catalyst model, whether it's a video game inspired shooting or misogyny inspired shooting, like the Catalyst model says that these shootings are going to happen eventually. The catalyst just kind of determines who the victim is,
Mm-hmm.
or at
Yeah.
least some of the victims.
Sure, yeah. Or and it's incidental. That's the biggest thing. It happened, yeah, but there are two things at play. One, it could have been anything, and two, his self-report is crap. It's his self-report is shaped by public perception of how we make decisions, right?
Hmm.
I assume he's never talked to a psychologist who's told him how we actually make decisions. So he thinks, okay, why am I doing this? And then we search for reasons, which is funny because he's like, oh, I'm pissed. God, I just wish I could kill everyone because I'm a violent person. Why do I feel that way? And then afterwards he prescribes why he feels that way. It's not that he thought about it beforehand. Like we don't. That's not how we operate. Anyway, okay, I'm done.
Right.
The point is he's a violent guy, guys, and he would have killed anyone. It just so happened one of the big frustrations in his life was his inability to get a mate, and then that got channeled into pickup artist crap, where he, I don't know. Everybody's a person, guys. Like he's yes, he ended up in a bad place, but he's still when he was born, he wasn't a shithead, right? Like it's just that his violence kind of got the best of him, violent tendencies.
And Chris Ferguson just wrote an article about this in the Time magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought up some points that I've been thinking about too. Like, why is it so important that we understand that ideology is incidental? And
Mm-hmm.
one of the points he raised is that the more time we spend being focused on these side streets of ideology, like feminism and misogyny, these are important conversations to have, right? Like,
Definitely.
these are important causes. It's okay to feel passionate about them because they are important causes. But whenever these things happen, whenever a shooting happens, we focus on this like violence in the video games. We focus on feminism. We focus on yes, all women. We focus on all these things that distract us from actually solve. Like if we want to solve this problem of mass shootings, should we focus on the thing that's incidental, or should we focus on the thing that's 50 to 80% of the problem?
Yeah, and ideally both. Definitely. Like, let's put some time and money into the feminist cause. Let's put some time and money into the psychological cause. But if we're actually looking at what is the predictor here, like what we need to keep our eyes open for, we don't need to keep our eyes open for a bunch of people who are pickup artists. Yes, they're bad people, but they're not going to kill women. And yes,
Right.
they may report horrible things, just like feminists report horrible things sometimes about men, like and that's shitty. And some men's right activist people report horrible things, but they don't do them. Why?
Right, because they're not violent. They're not murderers. They're not gonna.
Exactly, because they have an impulse control device that fucking works, and
Right.
they're not violent people genetically. So people say, "Oh, I could do that," or "I can see why they would do that." I was like, I can see why a lot of people would do a lot of things, but they don't. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, I know, but whenever you've got, I don't know. Anyway, I feel like I'm repeating myself at this point, but
Right.
so frustrating.
Yeah, it's frustrating to see the national debate like hijacked into something that's not going to prevent mass murders in the future. Like at best, like let's say we waved a magic wand and there's no more pickup artists, there's no more misogyny, women and men are now completely equal. Like, is that guy still going to shoot somebody? Yes.
Yeah,
It's just going
right.
to be like a different target. It's, like you said, it could be like the guy who left his mailbox open.
Oh my
So
gosh.
if our goal is to stop mass murders, we should focus on what?
Well, number one, impulse control, right? So there's not a lot you can do genetically. I don't think that we should throw these people in jail based on the fact that they might become
Like a
violent.
minority report, kind of like you are at high risk of being a murderer later, so
Yeah,
to deal
yeah.
with you.
I think so. Where can we intervene? Well, I think, and this is me having a hammer and looking for nails, but I feel like psychology is good here because we need to learn impulse control. Like if there's a neural substrate that we can kind of buff up, and that's what we want to do. We want
Can
to
I add evidence-based like good psychology? Because I believe
exactly.
there's a lot of people practicing what's called psychology now that might not have been like, wasn't he seeing a therapist?
Yes, he was. I know, and that's when people are like, "See, even you guys can't save him." And I was like, "Can you please tell me anything about something called empirically supported treatments, ESTs or EBTs, evidence-based treatments? Could you tell me about those? I'm not sure. It's kind of my focus, but I don't know. Please
Right.
tell me." Okay, yeah. Oh, no, that's a big deal. And they're like, "Oh, okay. So Texas sharpshooter fallacy. You're saying that like because it didn't work, it wasn't evidence-based." I was like, "That is literally the opposite of what evidence-based means. No, evidence-based means has already been shown to work, and so we do it." And and I have even had a point to people. I'm like, go to Chambliss, for example, was one of the big psychologists. The APA paid for this movement. They funded it and said we need to find out what really works because the other fields like counseling and social work, they don't care, and we need to be the people who set ourselves apart. And so we did all the research on that, and we try to disseminate it to other fields. But and not all psychologists are that way because a lot of them are old school, and there's still schools that are not that way. So that whole conversation comes out during this thing, and it just sucks. It's complicated. So I'm like, guys, please just take my authority. I don't have time to say this on every single thread. Understand that the experts on this all are in accordance. You know, I emailed Chris about this, and I was like, hey man, this is how I conceptualize it. That's right. He said yes.
Sorry, you just said the experts are all in accordance. I emailed Chris, so we both.
And we're both like, yeah. Okay. Well, but there's not that many people who look at this. So anyway, yeah,
Right.
a lot of people look at it incidentally, but this is actually myopically my focus right now, and it's the same as Chris's. So Chris's, yeah, he was on the vice president's council for a little bit on this. He's the top dog. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure I was right before I misquoted him or misapplied his model. And yeah, he said, yeah, he said, yes, I agree with your assessment, and they went on to elaborate.
Right. So I feel like if we spent more time prioritizing evidence-based psychological treatment,
Yep.
or evidence-based treatment versus banning video games or banning, I don't know, Batman film shootings, whatever incidental catalyst it is, if we focus more on the thing that will actually stop the murders and the problem, like we should still fix misogyny, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to stop mass murders. So if our goal is to stop mass murders, we should focus more on what's actually going to stop them.
Yeah, and oh shoot, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, and the cool thing is this all comes full circle. That's what I told a couple feminists, and I even said I was like, guys, listen, I've posted here before. You guys know me. Like I constantly champion like women's rights, all people's rights, and so like I'm not a jerk here. You can't dismiss my opinion as being a jerk. I'm just trying to tell you, make sure, keep shooting, just adjust fire. I like your movement, just move it for a bit, just on this one. Don't hijack this poor tragedy for your cause, wherever you are, whether you're MRA, feminist, pickup artist, right, whatever you are. But anyway, it comes full circle because as I said, what the treatment would be, you guys, if you'd let me get there, according to the model, this person would be violent no matter what. So what we would do is we'd keep them tracked by evidence-based psychologists and or evidence-based counselors, if there's such a thing, and social workers. And I know there are that follow that. It's just a lot less common. And track this person, and then what we do is keep him from migrating to things that would act like a catalyst. Guess what that would mean? That would mean keeping him away from misogyny. You guys win. Please listen to what I'm saying. We all win here. It's just that this guy, what evidence shows would be best for him is to get him into a mental health system, a chronic one, because you can't fix antisocial personality disorder. You can only mitigate the damage because it's a fundamental lack of empathy. Because we don't have it, and so like I would follow that guy over time with a team of counselors, have him check in, and then have his social support, like his mother, his teachers, everyone, keep an eye out for these extremist ideologies, because it doesn't matter which one it is, he's going to gravitate to one of them, and so make sure he doesn't have a reason to do it, and then make sure that any of the indicators of violence aren't happening, like cruelty to animals, the use and abuse of people, for example, like things as small as cutting lines should be like a little bit like, wait a minute, hold on, that kind of thing. So there are ways to stop this, but it isn't about focusing on which one he gravitates towards. It's focusing on him as a violent-prone individual. It's just, you guys win either way, because he would have gravitated towards it, because he would have been frustrated by girls, because he's creepy.
It's a minefield, though. Like, people have these causes that they feel justifiably passionate towards, but it makes it more of an emotion-based argument and less of a logic. Like even a lot of the people that were arguing with you online were atheists who value science, where they say they value science, right? Like they self-identify. Like if you ask them, what are your values? It's like science, evidence, studies, like they're they call themselves skeptics or brights, they're very much self-identify in that way. But when push comes to shove, emotions still kind of trump that, right?
Yeah, so the way that works is, and man, we're almost running out of time here, but I'll talk about how that works. There's this, remember I talked about behavioral inhibition system in the beginning and
Hmm.
behavioral activation system. So do
Hmm.
you have any indication of what those are just by the names?
Behavioral inhibition system would be whatever like inhibits your like whatever in your brain is saying like don't punch that guy.
Yeah,
And behavior activation system would be like the thing that says green light, go ahead and punch that guy or whatever.
yeah, and these two are
Red
quite
light,
opposite,
green light.
obviously. Yeah, there you go, red light, green light, sure, good. My advisor's like a lot. He's really into this research because, as it turns out, there's also things. It's fight, flight, or freeze. There's actually a third response.
Right.
Anyway, he's big into this, and he helps disseminate that idea too, because a lot of people think it's just fight or flight. He's like, no, it's fight, flight, or freeze. It's important for whatever reason. He's big about it, and he's a really smart guy. But yeah, so how does that work with? Let me put it this way: all stimuli are created equal in this sense, and I mean that this works. This behavioral inhibition or activation, this approach avoid thing,
Hmm.
works with everything, including ideas. So how does that play out here?
So what you're
Oh,
saying
wait,
is
wait,
if
wait. Sorry,
go ahead.
sorry, sorry. First, I should explain how that works. When we feel like to approach something, what we do is we process it through a different portion of our brain, or
Uh,
psychologically speaking, we spend less time scrutinizing it, and then if we try to avoid something, which is we spend more time scrutinizing it and figuring out like what is it about that thing I don't like, that kind of thing. And we our emotions pump up. It pumps up into our reptilian brain, right? The limbic system gets fired up, and
mhm.
we get less activity in the frontal lobes. So how could that possibly be going on here?
And this might be cheating, but I think I've read a study about this where people present with ideas that they were predisposed against or that they didn't like. It would trigger like let's say you're talking to a liberal person and you're bringing up conservative ideas. Like it would actually trigger that part of their brain that was like the same limbic reptilian brain that would be like if they saw an alligator in front of them in the water,
Yep.
and
Yep.
they would immediately start criticizing like scrutinizing it more and like assessing it as a threat to themselves,
Yep.
like not a physical threat, but in their brain it's the same reaction as if it were a physical threat.
Right. So they fight or flight it. Right.
Hmm. And the
It-
same thing the other way, like if a conservative person is presented with liberal ideas, like it's just like it's almost an existential threat at that
yeah.
point, the way their brain deals with it.
And what happens if you start fighting something and it's not working? What do you
You
do
get,
then?
you flee or you get
Yep,
frustrated.
you get the fuck out. Yeah, and that's what happens in these debates. Like these people start getting upset, and I'm like, listen, you're getting aroused, and my job now is to in the therapy room is I take you from getting less aroused.
Bow chicka wow wow.
Yeah, central nervous system. It's hard to talk about that without scientifically because we mean a whole different thing when we say arousal.
Right.
You're getting some CNS activation here. I need you to get back to your rational brain. So I de-escalate. So I say nice things like listen, I just start empathizing like crazy and validating
Yeah,
everything
like,
they
oh
say.
yeah, I can see why you're concerned
Yeah,
about that. Like it's
that
really a
makes a lot of
concern.
sense. It's a
Right.
big deal. You get them back to where they're willing to talk about it and keep them away from fight and flight. So
Yeah, and I saw this in the conversation. There was a thread on this that you were arguing about, and you'd be like, okay, I can see your point. I can tell you're very passionate about this,
yeah,
and like you kept on talking him down, and then he'd get back up and then talking him down. But eventually, like the to get the fuck out
flight.
response,
Yep,
yeah,
that's what
went
happens.
out. And he was
'Cause
like, "You guys are all fucking morons," and he like flipped everyone off and pieced out of
yep,
the conversation.
drives away with his tires squealing with his fingers out the window. That's what happens a lot. But it's because his fighting didn't work, and he's
Hmm.
still emotionally aroused. If he wasn't, he'd be able to say, "Huh, that's a good point," and then move on. And we know that's how it works.
Right.
So anyway, that's happening here. I hope everyone listens to that and then realizes that and start using this, and you'll
Yeah.
start seeing it everywhere. It's awesome.
Yeah, and it's really great if you can catch yourself in it. Like I've been doing that more, having just been in your contact enough to where like sometimes we'll get into an almost argument and then you'll be like, oh wait, I worded that poorly because this and this, you probably felt attacked. I'm like, I did feel attacked and my emotions escalated. Here's how I felt, and we just like instantly no more arguing. It's really
Yeah,
great. Like if both people are aware of this, you'll have just a great all your
it's
relationships
awesome.
get better.
I know, and I know, and oddly, the only other person who knows about this like quite well in my life is my wife, and we do the same things. Like if it's like all of a sudden we feel like something, we feel like we're getting aroused. No, we're getting emotionally aroused. Then we say wait, hold on, and then you know that as you being the first person who identified it needs to
Mhm.
look at the other person and start de-escalating, and they'll
Right.
get to where they're very reasonable right after.
Hello?
Oh, sorry, Mike gave out.
Yeah.
Please do this in all your relationships. It's super helpful.
Right.
including online debates and in video games.
Well, in role-playing games, yeah. A
Yeah.
lot of those are interpersonal. A lot of those things, like we've had times in role-playing games where someone's been like, "Oh, fuck this," and throws a dice across the room, and just been like, "This is the worst. You're out to get me." And the emotion, like these are not things he would say in a logical, normal sense.
Right.
But because he's feeling frustrated, because he's been literally fighting a bad guy in the game, and it's not been working out for him, and so he's just like, you stop reacting. So if you can train yourself to say, "Wow, I'm being really emotional right now. We should put the brakes on this." Or to react well when somebody else points that out, because sometimes if you point that out, like if you don't do it well, like, "Oh wow, you're being kind of emotional right now," that's the worst thing to say, right? Fuck you, you're being emotional.
Yeah.
So like it's very delicate, but when you get used to it, like it actually makes all of your relationships better.
It does, yeah. You just think of it as de-escalating the situation, and you really have to get rid of this truth, right, wrong idea too, because you're like, no, they need to see I'm right, and I'm like, that doesn't matter. They're not going to see anything until they de-escalate, and the way to do that is you need to make sure that they don't feel like they need a fight or flight right now. The way they do that is to make sure that you empathize with them like crazy. Just turn it way up. Turn it way up. It's useful for you. If you want to talk to the person and you're still engaging them, you have some point you want them to see, you've got to turn it down. And over time, they might flight at that point and just say like, well, F it, if they're still emotionally aroused, which is also a lose, but that's okay.
So yeah, it's pretty wide-reaching thing. Basically, everybody does it. Nobody's immune to it. Religious people, atheists, everybody is illogical. Everybody is emotional. Everybody is prone to these errors and thinking and these problems. But the important thing to take away from it, I think, is to realize that we don't know why we act the way we do. Ideology is incidental, and de-escalate.
Right, yeah. So true. And all this does come into play in the role-playing groups as well, man, that's for sure. We've dealt with some serious stuff sometimes, anger, like, that sorts of thing.
Or even just frustration, right? Like sometimes as you feel frustrated, you stop making good decisions too. Like, I don't know, whatever. Let's just do whatever, like you just... So it's really good to be cognizant of your own emotional state while you're doing role-playing games and while you're arguing on the internet and doing anything else in life.
Or gaming, like people break their controllers all the time like this. Like, realize if you're trying to fight and it's not working, you're either going to fight your controller to throw it down or you're going to go F this and storm off, that kind of thing. So be careful.
So yeah, anything else we should say about narrative RPGs and ideologies?
I don't think so, man. Elliot Rogers kind of hijacked this one, but I hope you guys enjoyed that. I know it's very topical and important right now. Oh man, you know what I realized? A lot of our audience is a little lag behind, so they may not get this until like...
Probably won't be that important by the time they get to it. And for our foreign listeners, they might not have been following the story as well either. But the important takeaway, I think, is still translates.
Yeah. Violence. I mean, everyone's interested in that. You don't want to get shot at, so hopefully it's relevant at all times.
Life is short, so love the one you've got.
Nice. Sublime.
You might get run over. You might get shot. Yeah, so great. Let's move on to feedback then.
All right, this is the feedback section where we talk about our interaction with the community. You guys, this is one of the sole reasons why we made this show, because me and David have this conversation all the time anyway, and we wanted friends and people to talk to about it. And to talk, you need to have bidirectional movement of audible sounds. That's a really weird way to say I want to hear from you.
That's true. We want some bidirectional auditory stimulation from our audience.
And so, to make it auditory, David, do you want to read one?
Indeed. Now, this comes from Roger from Australia. So, as I'm reading it, imagine Slade Wilson from Arrow is reading it with a kind of badass Australian Special Forces voice.
Can you do an accent that isn't like that, but still Australian?
A little bit Australian. Let's see.
Hi, guys.
Crikey, look at the size of that one. That's probably a little offensive to our Australian listeners, but hey, guys, thanks for the podcast. I've listened to all of them and often find myself discussing your topics with friends and sometimes researching your topics as well. I'm a pilot instructor and have to study and teach human factors, which is a topic involving psychology while flying. The concepts are extremely dated, so listening to your thoughts and introversions and the changeability of the personality traits is very eye-opening. Don't worry, I'm not quoting you guys in class. Haha. David's input on the literary aspects of games and characters, etc. is just as fascinating. I loved your thoughts on the origins of vampires. Thanks for all your efforts. Thumbs up from Australia.
Oh, well done. All right, yeah. We probably offended them all, but
Hopefully that
hopefully
wasn't
not.
too offensive. No, it comes from a place of love. Americans view Australians as just a continent full of badasses who
Yeah.
live in a world where nature tries to kill them constantly, and they punch it in the face.
Oh yeah.
So it comes from a place of admiration.
Yeah, you guys are held in very high regard by most Americans. I've never heard someone be like stupid Australians ever.
Yeah.
They're
All I've ever heard stereotypically about Australians is like girls find them sexy, and
yeah,
men wish they could have share a pint with them.
yeah.
So
And
good.
Australian girls are supposed to be really, really fun.
So good on you.
Yeah, good on you, mate. Yeah. So
But
cool.
yeah,
Yeah,
thank you
appreciate
for
that. This guy teaches people to fly, man. So he's also perpetuating the stereotype. He's like,
yeah, he's a badass flight instructor.
yeah, he's just stabbing, killing things because things are probably trying to kill him all the time while he's trying to teach people how to fly.
But bad accent aside, it really made my day to see this show up. We just love getting unsolicited thank yous.
Yeah, that was
Um,
really cool. And to see, like that's weird that, I mean, in this day and age, it's not weird, but it's weird from like old paradigms of like being able to have this conversation with people um, across a massive body of water.
right, we don't even think about like international audiences when we're talking, so that
Those are
might be why.
jokes.
Well, it's just where everybody kind of focuses on what's around them.
It's called the Centroid. Yep.
hmm So cool. Glad to know that our thoughts are being heard down under.
Yeah, yeah, and keep sending your feedback. You can always jump on the Facebook page if you're not already there, Rudder, and yeah, throw in your 2 cents. It sounds like you're researching it yourself, so you might come on up on new things that we didn't know or other listeners didn't know. So yeah.
Yeah, and stay warm. It's winter for those guys.
Oh yeah, man.
So no new emails. If you guys have a question you want us to address on the show, something psychological or literary or just anything, if we're not experts, we'll just give you our best guess and then qualify it by saying we don't really know.
Yeah.
Email the show at thegametheorypodcast@gmail.com. All one word.
Yes, and also follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/gametheorypod. It's I put up a lot of stuff on. Well, I don't know. I put up stuff on there, I should say, and I think most of it's interesting. So, and even if you don't do Twitter, just check the Twitter page and like look at some of the stuff. I think it's super interesting. It's along the same vein of what we talk about here, and plus it's always fun to have people tweet at us and say, "Hey, man, blah blah blah," or whatever.
Yeah, and a lot of great conversation takes place on our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/Game Theory Podcast. So join us there, join the conversation. There's just way too much to even summarize anymore. Like the new Smash Brothers tournament is happening. We got announcements for video games like Battlefield 3 for the PC. Download is free right now on Origin.
Yes.
Somebody had a vote about whether or not he was an ass for bashing into his wife on Mario Kart Battle Mode when he was playing a large character and she was playing a small one. The general consensus was no, you did the responsible thing. So,
Yeah.
so lots of good conversations happening there. So join us, facebook.com/group/Game Theory Podcast.
Yep, and finally, last little plug is twitch.tv/thegametheorypodcast. Occasionally we stream up there, especially when we get new games. I plan on streaming more some of this Castlevania Lords of Shadow. If you want to look at it, just see the visual art style. Plus, you get to see my stupid face on there, just sitting there staring at the screen. I try to interact, but sometimes I'm just like, whoa, just staring at the screen. So sorry about that. But yeah, check it out. And
And if you are listening to the show and you're thinking, man, this is some high-quality educational edutainment, if you will, and I would pay $30,000 for this every week. I would happily pay it. But I don't have a way to pay it because there's no donation button. That's fine. You can pay us by leaving us an iTunes review or a Stitcher review, whatever you use to listen to us. 5 stars are always preferable, but whatever you think it's worth. And that's kind of like, it's better than money. It's like Bitcoin, you know? It's not real, but it's still money to us.
yeah, it's still currency, right?
Yeah, it's still a currency of some kind, and a stable one.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, please do that. There's all our plugs. And for next episode, we were thinking about doing a listener suggestion, which was player choice versus illusion of choice.
Yes, there's a lot of places we can go with that, both in tabletop role-playing games, video games, and life itself.
Yes, indeed. And yeah, and we're trying to go along a little bit of a vein of tabletop RPGs right now because it's very relevant to us, and there's a lot of psychological principles and a lot of literary principles inside of there. So it's kind
probably
of a fun
smaller subset of people who play tabletop RPGs as video games. But if you do play RPGs, let us know. that'll be our question of the week. What RPGs do you play and why? What do you like about them?
Yeah, that'd be good. Plus, as you guys notice on this, we tend to get tangential anyway into the topics that are just broadly applicable.
Right. So tune in next week for more of that.
Great, yeah. And until then, I am Jeremiah.
And I'm David.
And this has been the Game Theory Podcast.